Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode number 162. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my son Skyrim and Chris Raygun. Chris, how are you today, my friend?
I'm good. 162. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's insane.
We're deep. We're deep inside. Yeah. We can't come back now. Now we can't stop.
Yeah. So. We're in the abyssal layer of the Marianas Trench.
Yes. The Marianas Trench. Well, I know you understand, Chris. That always horrified me more than almost anything because it's not only so deep underwater, but it's endlessly deep, like miles and miles deep. And can you imagine the eldritch and unusual creations that might be down
disgusting. There? Somebody sent me a picture the other day of like a shark with like human lips and like teeth that like hooked back like backwards. And it was like, hey, this is a real thing that lives like in the darkness where you can't see it, where the pressure is like, I think something like 1,800 elephants on top of you. It's like, oh, cool. That's a very cool place.
That's the most wild thing is these creatures exist, I guess, with their skeletons and all of this under this enormous pressure that would crush us. I think it's similar. Like if you try, Jupiter is a gas giant. It doesn't have a surface, but if you were to land on the surface of Jupiter, I think it would like compact you into like something the size of a small box. Yeah, because it's so heavy and the gravity is so strong. Anyway, good to see you, Chris. It's always good to see you. Dustin Furman, executive producer.
Hello.
It's less good to see you, but it's still good to see you.
Oh, that's fair.
I see you're wearing a Sega shirt. So it's just a series of failures in a circle around a Sega logo.
Yeah.
Which is
so
nice. Yeah.
This shirt, I actually, this is one that they were giving out at their booth at E3.
Oh, cool.
But it's a really nice quality shirt.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is like, even though it was a lot of failures, I still like something about Sega hardware is intriguing now just because they were a giant and now they're gone completely. I think on this shirt, I think there's like a baseball thrower. I don't know what those are called.
A pitcher?
A pitcher. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Like a mechanical.
Sure. That's interesting. As opposed to like the bazooka style one. I love batting cages.
By the way. This right here. If anyone wants to zoom in, it's right above my nip here.
Keep rubbing your nipple like that.
Oh yeah.
We'll probably get some sort of strike or something.
Or more views.
Yeah, maybe.
A copyright strike.
Copyright strikes up somehow. Yeah, we're somehow this is pornographic and not allowed. I don't know how that would result in a copyright strike, but nonetheless, it's funny. Well, it's funny you wear that shirt because I've been talking about my friend John who gave me all those games, who's a builder here, and I have all the games I have to send to a friend Kenny in Ohio, but I sent all the hardware he gave me to my friend Eric Castro in San Diego, my good buddy who owns Polite Provisions, the wonderful cocktail bar in San Diego. And he sent me a picture of all the stuff I sent him because it was just in boxes. And I was just like, here, take it. I brought it to the UPS store. And it was, I think, 11 Genesis units, like a couple of Sega CDs, a few NES and SNES consoles, some PS2s, PS1s, original Xbox and all of this. And I really become enamored with Genesis in particular, not because I think it's a very good console, because I honestly don't. It was just, it just, I can't undo that in my mind and it's just not going to happen. But it's like it's a fascinating little machine. And there were so many things you could attach to it and modulate it in different ways to do things. And I kind of took that for granted when I was a kid. Because I knew someone had a Sega CD, I knew someone had a 32X and all these different things. And looking back, I'm like, this is pretty cool. I was stuck with my SNES and like the best it got for us was Super Game Boy, which was kind of cool. But we never had anything like that like eked more life out of something. So, shout out to Sega.
I think a lot of people took it for granted because like people saw that and assumed that at some point that's how consoles would be. Like, oh yeah, that they're doing that. So maybe in the future we'll have that all the time. And it got less and less.
Right.
It's awesome. I mean, I always think about the ports on machines that were never used. And like NES even has a port underneath it. If you take like a clip off of it, there's like a parallel port in it. And some of these things were like for Satellaview and all that stuff in the Famicom versions. And obviously they didn't know what to do with a lot of this stuff, but I just loved that the Sega, you never had any question about what these things were for Genesis. Everything just kind of connected and worked. And it's pretty cool. All right. This is a PlayStation podcast, though. Welcome to Sacred Symbols. And for the uninitiated, we do this each and every week. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access to every episode of the show. It goes live 3 days early over there. Again, stripped of its ads, and you have audio and video access. You can submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas over there. We have plenty of them to read on today's show. We also do 2 episodes a week of Sacred Symbols Plus, which is exclusive to Patreon for the most part. Except when sometimes we release topics later. We always release our review discussions later. So you get them weeks later, months later. But a couple episodes we released at the same time. We did another Activision-Blizzard centric episode with our legal analyst, Rick Hogue of Hogue Law and Virtual Legality. We made that free for everyone immediately. So that's a follow-up to last week's Sacred Symbols Plus. We hope you enjoyed that. And it hasn't gone live yet, but it'll go live a day after this goes live on Patreon. I did a really awesome Sacred Symbols Plus episode with Moore's Law is Dead. And Tom over there at Moore's Law is Dead, who's like a hardware expert. And we talk about all sorts of things. And it's a fucking phenomenal episode. I think people are really going to dig it when it goes live. So thank you for your support over there. And of course, support Defining Duke, Knockback, and all of the rest. We couldn't do it without you. Let's get into a few things here that I wanted to read from the audience. Andrew Betteridge wrote in, this is kind of a PSA, I guess. That's what he says as well. He says, greetings, Sacred Symbols crew. This is more of a pro tip or PSA for the PS5 owners on a budget. Even though I had money put away for it, the PS5 still felt like a massive purchase when I was lucky enough to score one a retail a week or two ago after dropping $700 Canadian, which is like, I think, $10 American on the console. Last thing I wanted to do immediately was drop another 80 or 90 bucks Canadian on a game. Fast forward to the other day when I brought my 2-year-old daughter to story time at our small town Ontario, Canada public library. I spotted another dad with his son at the checkout desk, checking out what seemed to be a couple of Nintendo Switch games. This piqued my curiosity, so I ventured to a corner of the library I did not know about. Lo and behold, before me was a wall of video games going back to the 360 and PS3 era. Very bottom of the wall were about a dozen PlayStation 5 games. Instantly, I snagged the copy of Miles Morales and brought it to the desk. Guy working told me I was one of maybe 3 people in my town who had ever taken out a PS5 game. TLDR, check out your local public library for video games. So I wanted to bring this up because it's great advice. And I don't know why I hadn't thought to bring that up more, because I know that libraries are doing that now, but it's never really come up on conversation. Maybe a lot of people out there don't know, because when I was a kid, we had like VHS tapes and you can get like CDs and stuff. And I know they segued to DVDs. And I know now there's even like digital repositories of books and music and stuff that you can get from libraries, which is kind of cool. So video games. Chris, have you ever rented a video game from taken out a video game from the library?
No, not from a library. I don't know if I've ever seen, like, in the times that I would find myself in a library reliably often, I don't think I had ever really seen a video game, because like the only library that I would be in all the time was the library in our school. And that certainly didn't have any of the cool things that like actual proper like public libraries do. So yeah, because we just lived super far from it. It was so out of the way to get to our library that it was just not worth it. But I did know that they did this because I had some friends a few years ago who like walked around town here in Burbank and they were like, oh, there's a public library here and they got like video games and shit. I was like, oh, weird. But that was the point. I was like, I wasn't even using discs anymore. So I was like, all right, cool, whatever. Neat.
Yeah, it's a nice option. I didn't, certainly, I mean, maybe people can write in about this and tell me differently, but we didn't have video games at the library at all. I graduated high school in 2002, and that wasn't an option in our public library. We actually had 2 public libraries in my area, and they were great. And I have very fond memories of the library. I love the library. I love to read. My sister Dana worked at a library when I was a kid, and when my mom and dad got divorced, I was always with her because there was no one to watch me. So I like lived. If you're in the area over there, Brookhaven Public Library on Beaver Dam Road, I like lived there, and so I have a lot of good memories of it. But Dustin, renting video games or taking video games out of the library. What is your experience with this?
I don't think this is something my library has. I did a quick Google search. And here's from the Butler Library. The library has an Xbox and Wii, along with many games each that only teens are allowed to use. I was going to suggest, if you're here for the meetup, maybe you could get together, get a game of Boom Blocks going or something.
Yeah, Boom Blocks.
Library card.
Nice reference.
But only teens. So, get out of there, you creeps. can't use the libraries we.
Yeah, I'm of two minds with this because public libraries are tax funded. Sometimes they get endowments too, but on one hand I'm like, well, how can you justify this? But then on the other hand, I think, well, how can you justify the fact that I can go get like fucking Die Hard with a Vengeance on DVD or something? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Either, and that I can go get like No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom on cassette tape when I was, in middle school. That really didn't make any sense either. So and I was just having a conversation with someone about this, where storytelling in games is getting to the point where maybe a library can be looked at most as like a repository simply of not only information, but ephemera and culture as well. And that would be kind of like a part of it. So I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of accurate. I think that's probably the most reasonable way to justify it, like where it's like, yeah, this is part of culture. Here it is. You can have access to it at the public library if you can't access it normally. And it's like, I think it's kind of cool,
Definitely. I loved when I went to Northeastern's Snell Library. I think it was like 5 stories, our library. It was just incredible because there were so many stacks. It must have been hundreds of, I don't know for sure, 100,000 books. I don't know, more than that. Pretty more than that. I have no idea. But I would just walk down them sometimes and you just look at the list of these and it's like, what the fuck is it's like every book you've ever even could imagine. It was pretty cool. Things that have not been touched. For sure.
You know what I did remember just now? There were video game cheat code books in our school library. Now I think about it, and you could just take them out. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird because there's probably very little value in that, especially even when I was in school, because you could just Google that probably. But
because you think that's probably like that's bait to be like, oh, you're here, and so go get a novel or something while you're here. And also, I remember with the Scholastic thing, when you'd buy the books, you get the little thing. They had, I think, some cheat stuff in there sometimes too, like some weird third party. There was, especially in the NES and SNES era, there was so much like unofficial shit. I got to show you at some point. I brought it up. I have the unofficial Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy III SNES strategy guide, and it's like insane. It's huge, and it's based off the Japanese translation, and it's totally fucked up. It's so funny. And that's I just found it the other day, and I have all these old notes in it and stuff. I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be a little nostalgia trip for young Colin. All right. I wanted to read this from Sean McDaniel as well. Although we've gotten a lot of these kinds of comments, I just wanted to call this out. He says, hey, CDC. Hope all is well. No question this week, but I'd instead like to say thanks on your talks in general about being aware of what's going on behind the scenes in games and their respective companies. There was a time where I would have shrugged off what was going on in the Activision and Blizzard situations and continued to play Overwatch regardless, but thanks to your various talks on the pod, I personally decided not to play anything from or support Blizzard while keeping an eye on the news and updates regarding the situation to see if there will be a positive outcome. I know it's a small thing, but it wouldn't have happened without your input and advice. Thanks for that, and I hope you all take it easy. This is a great piece of feedback because we want to empower people with information. We don't want to tell you what to do. And I told you last week, like, I don't think it's a tenable position for me to take to say, like, I'm not going to buy a game from a certain publisher. Like, it's not going to happen. I can't do that in my position, I don't think. But we can certainly bring games and situations up and you can make the decisions in kind. And, I wanted to bring this up, by the way, because when I talked to Tom at Moore's Law is Dead, and you guys will hear that episode, he said something really poignant where he was basically like, people need to grow the fuck up a little bit. Politics and economics and social things and all of this, it's relevant to video games. And we want to continue to segment those appropriately from our show. For instance, we're not going to get too deep into Activision-Blizzard today because I did 2+ hours with a lawyer about it. So I feel like that's more effective. But I wanted to just appreciate that most people understand that. And that Tom's right. Like, maybe it is time for everyone to grow up a little bit and stop complaining about the inclusion of relevant issues, not tangential issues, relevant issues to the creation, the manufacture, the playing, the purchasing of games. And so we'll continue to do that. Thank you for that. And with that in mind, I just thought I saw this story. Kotaku reported it, although a bunch of others. Chinese media apparently called video games spiritual opium and tanked Tencent's domestic stock price as a result. And Giovanni D'Amico wrote in and said, hey guys, interesting news out of China this week as the state-owned newspaper criticized online gaming as opium for the mind. Momentum is building for broad regulatory crackdown from the CCP, that's the Chinese Communist Party, on electronic entertainment, and Tencent, which immediately took an enormous 10% hit on the market after this newspaper piece, is already talking about imposing new limits on playtime within their products in order to appease the state. Last week, 3 Chinese tech giants, Tencent, Meituan, and Alibaba, lost more than $237 billion of market value in just 48 hours because of investor fears over CCP overreach. Clearly, what we're seeing is a crack of the whip by the state to make it clear to big tech that CCP is in control. Market impact be damned. Do you think Western gaming companies, and especially the business minds that seem so eager to get into bed with Chinese investors, are taking note of just how quickly their fortunes can change, literally, when the CCP decides to flex its muscles and assert itself? This is a great, first of all, Giovanni, very well written and very well said. This was hysterical because it just seemed to illustrate and put a period on exactly what I've been saying. The CCP owns the media in China.
Mhm.
So when they say something, they're saying it for purpose, for some sort of reason. And they're hurting their own companies in order to make it clear that they are the controlling party. Chris, what do you think about not necessarily this, but about kind of the increasing necessity of political awareness in our sphere, and the fact that I personally feel, as the steward of the show, that it would be irresponsible of us to ignore this stuff when it's germane to video games and, like I said, the play, manufacture, creation of video games. So what do you think about all this, and especially the rather convenient illustration of recent episodes?
Look, I think look, I mean, there's no doubt that it's important to talk about this stuff. I think this is omni-relevant, honestly. I think this is probably like the most relevant political discussion happening in games media, in my opinion, because it's just so obviously, that is such an enormous amount of money. Like $237 billion that is not, I don't think anyone on this planet can really comprehend how much money that is, you know? Like, I feel like even just a billion itself is kind of like a wildly, like, what number? But, like, this is... I'm curious, though, as to, like, whether or not this will actually mean anything for, like, investors. Like, I'm sure this is, like, a temporary drop, but, like, ultimately, I feel like people look at China as, like, look at all those people, you know? So, like, I feel like there's still dollar signs on people's eyes, so I'm not sure if this little... snag is going to make that much of an impact on whether or not investors choose to work with China more, unfortunately, because I still think a lot of people are kind of looking at China as like, yeah, there's going to be hiccups, but like, look at all that money. There's so much money over there. We gotta try something, and we can play by the rules because fuck it, whatever. Like, money's more important than anything because we're a company and we suck. So sad, but I don't know. I don't know if this is like a canary in the coal mine necessarily.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right in the sense also that the money is so great that even this sort of loss, a 10% loss, which is a huge, I mean, that will wake anyone up, any C-suite up from their stupor. It's still chump change compared to the potential. And this is why I keep bringing this up, because if let me put it this way. If the reverse of overreach in games from a malign entity is control in one direction, then in the other direction is a democratization of game creation in a market, which will inevitably lead to the question being asked, why are the people in power in the first place? And that question isn't allowed. So getting anywhere close to that question is the CCP's priority. And this is what I'm trying to say. This is why it is such a big deal, because you're dealing with arguably the most powerful entity in the world, I would say. Even more powerful than the US government, just in the sense that they are intertwined so much with their commerce as a somewhat top-down controlled system with many capitalistic tendencies, of course, that they wield the governmental power that the United States wields and the hegemony over their area of the world, along with massive economic heft, which they can wield to their liking and will destroy their own value in order to prop up their power. That is unbelievable. And Dustin, I was just curious what your take is on this, and specifically about what Tom had said to me, which was maybe people need to grow up a little bit and stop whining about, not us per se. I think we have frankly a smarter than average audience in this industry, but generally speaking, people kind of being afraid of politics. This is why I know I'm going on and on, but this is the boy who cried wolf, right? Because when you talk about everything politically and make everyone tired of it, then when something important needs to be brought up, everyone's like, I don't want to talk about politics. How much more do I have to talk about politics?
Right.
So anyway, what do you think?
Well, the word political or politics has become so broad now that people are like, oh, they put a gay character in Star Wars. That's political. Where it's like the idea of social issues and political issues are now one and the same, which there is crossover. But so you have people that are sick of this idea of everything political. But when the reality is like these things, like you said, are very important, especially if some of your favorite game developers are being bought by China, who I looked this up because I knew it was recent. It wasn't until July 2015 that China unbanned consoles. 2015, 6 years ago. That's not very long ago. And then you see stuff like this about opium of the mind, which, by the way, there's only one. Oh, spiritual opium, and that's sacred symbols. So keep that in mind. But
who doesn't like a little opium?
Little spiritual opium.
I smoked opium on mistake once. I'll leave that for another time.
Telling me that.
By mistake?
Yeah.
That's insane.
I think, Colin, you said you're like, yeah, I rode the dragon that night.
Yeah.
That's what you said to me.
Yeah, like I was at a frat house at Northeastern, some random frat house. They had a hookah that everyone was smoking out of. And I was like, oh, it's weed or it's, tobacco, flavored tobacco, whatever it is. So hookah is a very common staple of college dorms and all of that. And so I hit it a few times and I'm like, man, what is this? And the guy's like, oh, it's like, it's hash and opium or something. And I'm like, I was like, how did I died inside because I take a lot of pride and never do. I've smoked a lot of weed, obviously, but and some mushrooms and stuff like that, things that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to people, but I've never done coke or anything like that. And so like to do that accidentally anyway.
Right. By mistake. That's awesome. That's like when I had 7 pot brownies before I realized they were pot.
Holy shit. Wait, we talked about this at one point, right? Did you just like instantly like get it knock you out? Did you green out from that?
No. So we're getting way off topic, but like
okay.
I was so hungry when I got to this party. I was like, what's here? Everything looked kind of like, It was like a homemade thing. Everybody made their own thing. And like, nobody's a particularly good cook. And I was like, brownies are safe. So I had like 5 of them. And then I was on my 6th and a friend of mine was like, what are you doing? How many of those have you had? I was like 5. He was like, oh, that has weed in it. And I was like, I feel fine though. I'm fine. Cause I had eaten like 5 in like, I think 10 minutes. And then like when I got home like 2 hours ago or 2 hours later, I was lying down on the floor in my room laughing at how sharp the light was. It was just a mess.
Oh my God.
I love it.
But I feel like if I had that happen to me, just because I've had bad experiences, I would have been like, oh no, like instant panic would have set, and then probably just, falling asleep and then waking up.
I interrupted
anyway,
you, I'm sorry.
Oh no. Okay. I think I got my point across. They're really just like, it is important as fans of video games to know about this stuff, which Colin, I think that our approach with letting people know through timestamps that it is skippable, that's a way to do it. But I don't think that I would encourage, I'm not going to tell people what to do, but I would encourage people that if this is your hobby or your career or whatever, that this is something that is very much worth paying attention to and being aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I'll also say this just in parallel, which is we use this term, and I think that people really look at me as being the progenitor of this term in a lot of ways, speaking with your wallet in our industry. I've said it for many, many, many years. And that just means having the information and making your own choices. As a consumer, if I were purely a consumer, I would be able to look at Activision-Blizzard and say, like, I could pretty easily avoid Activision-Blizzard games, probably will. And Sumo Digital is an example where someone was like, you're not going to buy any Sumo Digital games anymore. And I'm like, I went and looked and I was like, I've never bought a Sumo Digital game in my life. So it wouldn't be a difficult thing. We're simply trying to raise awareness of malign actors and influence in the industry. And there's nothing more malign than money coming out of totalitarian dictatorships, because it comes with all sorts of caveats. And it's not to say that money doesn't come with caveats in the United States or in Europe or in Brazil and other places, but it's not the same. And so we want to just bring that up. And I want to also bring something up. one person, not one, but a few people expressed concern saying that, like, Colin, I'm disappointed with you. You always said speak with your wallet. And now you're saying that you're not going to speak with your wallet. And I'm like, yeah, I said speak with your wallet, not speak with my wallet. I'll speak with my wallet. You speak with your wallet. Yeah. And we're not going to speak the same language all the time. That's okay. But I know the information I need. You know the information you need, or hopefully do, to make the decisions that are best for you. And there are certain choices, like there are certain things where if I knew companies were really in bed, like the NBA is a good example. I was getting a little bit more into basketball again. I love basketball. I love the sport. But I wasn't really into the NBA, and I started watching a little bit more over like the last 5 years, just when a game was on or whatever. But then when this whole thing happened with the Houston Rockets and the GM there, and they couldn't say this shit about Hong Kong, and they got in trouble, I was like, yeah, fuck this. I know the NBA is bought and sold, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice because it's not that important to me, and it has nothing to do with my life. But your decision might be different. You might have a real passion for the fucking Indiana Pacers, and you don't want to stop watching the Indiana Pacers. So that's your choice. Anyway, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Sacred Symbols listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/symbols. We say it a lot on our show, but it certainly bears repeating. Taking care of your mind is as important as taking care of your body. The two work in tandem, and if one isn't operating at full capacity, you simply aren't at your best by definition. Taking care of your body is straightforward enough. Exercise, eat well, moderate your vices, but your mind can prove to be a more sophisticated obstacle that requires totally different tools. One of those tools is therapy, and millions of people are in therapy right now to acquire the tools necessary to deal with what ails them mentally, whether that's depression or anxiety, motivational or security issues, temper or stress, or just about anything else you can imagine. And this is where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's this deep level of customization that's key, because just as a personal trainer would tailor-make a workout plan for your body, a therapist can help hone in on and ameliorate the most silent burdens of life. We all experience ups and downs, elation and sadness, gains and losses. It's how we deal with all of it that matters. And I'm a true believer in therapy and its ability to help those in need. And I'm an especially firm believer in BetterHelp and its customized approach to helping you with your issues, unlocking your single greatest asset. That's you, yourself, running optimally and unleashing your full potential. So head to betterhelp.com/symbols. That's BetterHelp.com/SYMBOLS and get 10% off your first month of sessions. Tend to your mind and put it at ease with therapy at betterhelp.com/symbols. Again, get 10% off your first month of therapy sessions at betterhelp.com/symbols. I wanted to ask you guys about this. So IGN had a letter posted from Jeff Strain, who was a longtime Blizzard employee. He co-founded ArenaNet, and then he actually is the founder of Undead Labs, which is the Microsoft-owned studio now. I don't think he's there anymore. But he published a letter, like an open letter on IGN, that people can go read. It's called, by the way, former Blizzard developer and ArenaNet Undead Labs founder, quote, we need unionization. Speaking of politics, he says in part here, during my 25 years working alongside talented developers, I've heard hundreds of profoundly disturbing stories about their industry experiences. I've also seen this cycle repeat itself numerous times across multiple companies throughout our industry. There has certainly been some positive change, and I do believe many developers and publishers, even large ones, are working in good faith to improve, but those efforts, while commendable, can't address the chronic issues in our industry systematically. In order to do that, game industry employees need advocacy and representation. We need unionization. Unions were started in this country to protect workers from abusive, cruel, abhorrent, unacceptable, and illegal treatment from companies. That's their entire purpose. If this week does not show us that our industry colleagues, even the most entry-level QA tester, need true support and baseline protection, I can't imagine how much worse it will have to get. I'm an entrepreneur and a veteran of 3 successful independent studio startups. I'm highly familiar with the financial, legal, contractual, and organizational aspects of game development. I also know that I have nothing to fear from unionization, nor does any company that pays employees fairly and equitably, provides quality health insurance, models respect and civility for female, POC, that's people of color, I think, LGBTQ plus employees, and supports a healthy whole life. It seems simple, but we clearly need help with it. The giants of this industry have shown us this week that we cannot trust them to moderate and manage the wealth and power that players and fans have given them. And he says also later, I welcome my employees to unionize. and I'm giving my full endorsement and support to an industry-wide adoption of unions. What do you make of this? This was an interesting letter, I thought, Chris, and comes from a place of, this is, I think, the most important thing that has ever been written or said about unions in video games ever so far. And at least opens the door, I think, in a more reasonable way for companies to start wrapping their minds around a unionized workforce that mirrors or begins to mirror what you see in places like movies and TV, in which the top down structure is almost entirely unionized. What do you think about this tribe in this letter?
I mean, yeah, I wish I was more educated on like unionization and stuff like this, so I can have like a more in-depth response. But like, he's writing, the way that this letter is written is it's kind of hard to disagree with it. You know, I know a lot of people who work in different industries, a lot of people who are in unions, a lot of people who are not. I know a lot of people who have issues with unions. I know a lot of people who adore them. And it's kind of, this article makes it, I think it's the most compelling and most good faith article that I've seen about it in a while. Doesn't come across as like particularly preachy or like particularly like, it's not like a Polygon think piece. You know what I mean? Where it's just kind of holier than thou. It really is coming from somebody with a lot of experience who makes a pretty compelling case. And I do wonder, I don't know. I just don't feel as educated on this topic as I wish I was. Speaks super deeply on it, but
yeah, I come from an
article.
I come from a union household. My dad is a New York City firefighter, and they're unionized. It's one of the most powerful unions in all of New York. Yeah. But I've long been against public sector unions, coming from a public sector union household, because I feel like they have too much power over tax money, which I feel is different than the revenue of a corporation, like the voluntary economic transaction between person and entity. And so I wouldn't even say much less. I have virtually no problem with the unionization of private industry, because that is just a function of the economic might or the economic desire of whatever it's happening in kind of the mystical alchemy of the way money moves. So I want to say that. And I want to say too, that as I've gotten older, I keep saying this, and I feel like I've gotten more liberal as I've gotten older, which is unusual. And I'm still conservative in fundamental ways, but I feel like I've kind of softened in some of these things. And reading this letter, Dustin, intrigued me because I own a video game developer and I also own this company. And I was thinking about his terms specifically when he's like, you have nothing to fear from unionization. And I was wondering, do I have anything to fear from my own people unionizing? The answer is, I don't know. I try to treat that. I don't mean that as an irony. I don't mean that, by the way, in any sense of irony. It's what came to mind for me. And I was thinking, my test of what I think is being a good boss is that no one hopefully asks for much more or needs much more because they're being tended to. And if I continue to run my companies in a people first way, then there'll be no need for unions, or it'll just codify what already existed. Seems like the need is much more imminent and emergent in truly toxic places. So in reading Jeff Strain's letter, I guess what I'm saying is it's what Chris said. He has all of this experience and he's being pretty blunt with it. And I'm sure, I know that there are people that are in his place that would vehemently disagree, but I wonder how many people would vehemently disagree if they ran a successful company and it wasn't publicly held. Those are two important things. And so anyway, I'm wondering what you think.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in the same boat as Chris in that I don't want to speak too authoritatively about things that I'm not just super aware of, but I think Chris was right in saying that he makes a very good and well thought out argument that it's hard to disagree with. And, you think about this idea of like, well, if you don't like the way your company is treating you, then go somewhere else is often the counter argument. But I don't know. I'm kind of don't really like that argument in the fact that like it's not just that easy if you have a wife and a kid in a house to just go somewhere else. And maybe you really do enjoy the projects you're working on, or you're passionate about what you're working on with your team. So I can I don't think that that's always necessarily a very good argument. But the only other thing that I will say is just on thinking about unions is that unions sure can be very helpful and protective to the workers, but it's not. There are situations where it's like the grass is greener on the other side. Like, for example, I know so Pittsburgh has to this day, a very up and coming film scene where lots of movies are more and more being filmed here over the past decade. And one of the reasons is because the union here, I don't even know if there is a Pittsburgh union or if just the laws around the union are much more relaxed. For example, they filmed The Dark Knight Rises here in Pittsburgh. I was always under the impression they filmed it here because they didn't want to do it in New York because it was too difficult to work with the film union in New York due to the laws that required them to work with the union. And so, here in Western Pennsylvania, obviously Pittsburgh, very pretty liberal city, but overall not going to be as liberal as New York. Their laws are much more lax, and you see a booming industry here. We have Netflix Netflix shows and stuff like that being filmed here all the time, to the point where it's even bleeding here in my hometown, where it's like they filmed shots for Mindhunter on Main Street in Butler. So you got to be careful if your union becomes too controlling, or if there's too much red tape to go through and you lose business, or things start to not work out because of that. But again, I don't know if that's like a very good comparison for the video game industry. But it is, I don't know. It's what's floating around in my mind.
I feel like, do you know the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where it spawned that amazing gif of Larry in between the Palestinian chicken restaurant and like the Israeli protesters or whatever, and he's like, he doesn't know what to do, and he's looking back and forth, and he's getting all the information he needs, and he can't make up his mind. And that shot, I love that shot, and it reminds me of myself in this, because you see, I've been listening to much more liberal media recently. I've been listening to a little of Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore and some of these guys. They're interesting people. I don't agree with everything they say, but it certainly brought to mind for me the plight of I've always said on this show too, like, class is everything. It's the true demarcation between the haves and the have-nots. It has nothing to do with your skin color or anything else. And they always cover these stories, like about an Amazon warehouse unionizing, or a vote on a unionization drive. And so, like, on one hand, there was like these really apparently pretty bad union or conditions in an Amazon warehouse, in which it got all this media coverage. But then when they voted down the union like 75% or something, which means that like they had no interest in unionizing. So you're like, okay, that's weird. But then you see this thing with like the Frito-Lay workers. I don't know if you guys have seen this, where there's like a Frito-Lay warehouse in Kansas City or something, where these people are like worked to the bone and like never get time off, and finally have gone on strike and won't get the money and the pay that they earn and deserved and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's fucked up. And the question, Dustin, you're absolutely right. The question is money, and therefore power, and where the power lies. And that's why I brought up a publicly traded company. The power lies with the people who own the company. And when that happens, you're not going to unionize very easily. If you're smaller than that, and going in, by the way, then you get your union, so it already exists in all of this. What I'm saying is, it's just going to be more difficult at the top, what I think, and it's going to be impossible at the bottom, because you can't unionize until you have success. You can't make a company and unionize it. It's just, I don't know how that works. I own two companies. I couldn't even fathom having to do that. We all have to make sacrifices, including me, at the beginning, and then we all start getting paid more and more, and that's what's happening for us now. So I wanted to say that, and I think that like these worker-run companies, like Motion Twin in France, the guys at the Dead Cells, that's a totally worker-owned developer.
Yeah, it's like a worker co-op, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I find that very interesting. It seems like they've actually succeeded. And so, looking at, just like we talk about Moon Studios, the guys that did Ori, as kind of the perfect studio to emulate in the work from home environment, since they've always worked from home and they've made all of their games like that. So too, would we want to look at some of these companies that have unionized, or just from the ground up somehow with French labor law and maybe some capital, some patient capital that didn't want to return right away, to say like, we're going to right off the bat split this company up, everyone owns a piece, etc. So it's going to, the middle ground is where this is going to be explored. For instance, Bungie, right? Like, that's a company where you can say like that. If that company unionized, you can imagine that happening, and that would have huge influences. But it's harder to imagine Sony Santa Monica unionizing, because then everyone would have to unionize in PlayStation Studios. It crosses country lines. It's a publicly held company. It's very complicated. So
yeah.
So we'll see. But I encourage everyone to read this letter from Jeff Strain and make up your own mind, because I found it quite illuminating. All right, let's see what else here. Oh, Josiah wrote in about this. I was curious what you thought about this. He says, "Hey, Skinnies. So after listening to the last Sacred Symbols discussion about what you've been playing recently, a question has been lingering in my mind. Why is a twin stick shooter called twin stick? I understand that you're using both analog sticks to control the game, but isn't that true of all shooters? If using both sticks is the only prerequisite, why isn't Call of Duty or Destiny considered a twin stick shooter? I feel like I can't be the only person confused by this, so any insight from the experts would be appreciated." The answer to this is obvious, of course, but I'm curious what your take is on this, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's not complicated. If you play a game and the stick is what shoots, it's a twin stick shooter.
Exactly.
It's very straightforward. You know, like every 3D game anyway, uses all the sticks. You know, like that's just how that works. There's also just like a general design philosophy behind twin stick shooters that kind of like it's usually isometric. You know, there's it's a very specific type of design. You know. And I feel like this goes back into our conversations about like, you know, what does adventure game mean?
Right.
To some extent, it's like, yeah, you could twist Destiny or like any given first person shooter into a twin stick shooter if you want to get like hyper literal. But, you know, that's really the only prerequisite that you need for twin stick shooters, that the stick is the primary method by which you engage combat. And most shooters don't do that. You know, most shooters like, would it be like a twin stick aimer, I guess? Like
yeah.
for Call of Duty, you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
that's the whole thing. The FPS uses the sticks for movement, not for shooting.
Exactly.
So Josiah, you know, Chris answered your question very succinctly, but do you have anything to add to this, Dustin?
No, I'm just curious. I think Chris said it perfectly. The only thing I'm just curious, I wonder how old the term twin stick shooter, because I instantly think of like Robotron 2084, where that was, you know, you had two arcade joysticks, and that was like kind of the birth of that. I don't know if it was the first, but it's probably the first most well-known one.
Right, because that's an interesting question, where the provenance of this comes from.
Right.
And where that term specifically comes from, because that term must be post DualShock. So you're looking at a term over the last 20 years, but the games go back further than that. For instance, Stardust began as an Amiga game in 1995. No one was using the term twin stick shooter, but certainly Super Stardust and all of their other games were. I worked on a twin stick shooter in Herbroxia 2. So yeah, that's the thing, Josiah. Movement in the left stick, aiming and shooting in the right stick usually. In FPS, movement in the left stick, camera control on the right, shooting on the triggers.
Yeah.
All right. One more thing before we get into what we're playing. I want to do a gut check. Roberto Cordova wrote in and said, "Hola, CDC. We are pretty close to know what the fuck Abandon is. If this thing is a huge disappointment, who is at fault? The indie developer or Sony? In my opinion, with all the experience Sony has in counting the No Man's Sky debacle, Sony is the one that needs to speak up if this sucks. I hope the conspiracies are true." I wanted to do a gut check because we're recording this on August 5th, and we will record again after the trailer, I think, is supposed to activate on the PlayStation 5 app. And then there's this long rumored event that might be happening that they might announce and then have within a few days of each other, I think. And that might be where we see Call of Duty and other things. But that also, some people are speculating that might be where we see Ken Levine's game too, which would be pretty interesting. But I wanted to just do a gut check of how we're feeling now. I was making fun of it on Twitter last week because I think SkillUp or someone from YouTube was saying on Twitter, you know, we have nothing to, he was saying, like, they released that Abandoned picture with the guy with the eye patch. And he's like, we have nothing to do with Konami or Kojima. Anyway, here's a poster with the Metal Gear Solid text. And then I responded to it. I'm like, yeah, regardless, here's Big Boss. You know, it's like what is going on? So anyway, Dustin, where's your gut?
Well, the gut is that I'm still saying this is not what it seems. There will be some kind of special reveal. Is it Silent Hill? Is it Metal Gear? Is it Konami IP? I don't know. But it's one of those things, like you said, it's like, we're not Konami, but we're going to do everything we possibly can to try to make it look like we're associated, even though we're denying it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, at some point, the blurred photo of the eye patch guy, Fitzboss, whatever, that to me, like, if anyone still feels bad for Blue Box, like, oh, they're a small developer, leave them alone. It's like, no. The time for feeling bad or the thought of feeling bad for them is over. At this point, if it is not what they say it is, the blame is on them completely at this point, because they have added fuel to the flame over and over again. So I guess the question, though, I think that Roberto brings up that's very interesting is that, is Sony, let's say this is bad, is it partially their fault? And I'm a bit mixed on this. I mean, I would say, yeah, they highlighted them on the PlayStation blog. And so I think that it's like, yeah, they definitely do have something to do with this, in the fact that they highlighted them on a PlayStation blog with a trailer that was an asset flip. Like, you guys should have done something or been like, this sounds like these guys are overpromising. Sounds like these guys are going to mislead our fans, or it looks like these guys are misleading our fans. We should interject, but they didn't. So yeah, I'm willing to say, now that I've thought out loud, Sony is also to blame if it's bad.
Well, I would agree with you there. Where's your mind at, Chris?
There's a lot of fuckery around this thing. Like, I feel like they probably put this thing out, and like, I feel like the greater video game public is probably going to look at these trailers and not realize they're asset flips. You know, they're going to look at that eye patch thing and not realize that it is a standard, Unreal Engine asset. They're not going to know these things. So this has red herring written all over it. This is some distraction or some weird thing that it is not what it seems. I think Dustin's right, but my main issue here is that I don't think, like, whatever this turns out to be, I don't think it's worth the frustration of trying to figure it out, because Kojima's done weird things like this, right? All sorts of like weird, like, ooh, what's he working on? What's that? What does this mean? Oh, here's a fake title, and then here's the real one. Those things were fun and cool and interesting, and this comes across to me like someone trying to do it with no elegance, no experience, no sense of forethought. I don't think this is Kojima. That is my gut check. I think this is just a studio that I'm sure this is probably, something, but I don't think Kojima's involved at all. I don't think this is like Metal Gear. I don't think this is like, I don't know what else it could be. Silent Hill. I don't think it's that either. I think it's just a misdirect to an underwhelming, reveal. That is the sense that I'm getting. And I could be wrong, but that I feel it real strong. Because this is annoying at this point. It is.
I totally understand what you mean. And I love that we all have kind of different feelings on this, because I get it. It seems clumsy. The one thing I find fascinating about this is that they didn't do this with Death Stranding. So it wasn't like the last game they did a kind of like weird thing with it. It was Metal Gear Solid 5 where they really had fun with it. They didn't do anything weird with Death Stranding. In fact, it was I was saying like it was announced way too soon, and I was making fun of how they probably had nothing, and they made it extraordinarily quick. But you can kind of understand why when you play the game. There's not like much AI in the game, or they made a world and you kind of traverse through it. And it's wonderful. I love that game.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, well, maybe Kojima is bored. I mean, maybe, and I've been thinking about, like, with PT, maybe they were clearly planning on doing more. And PT was like the beginning, the genesis of something else. And so I could understand at the same time, Kojima having all of these things laid out, the Twitter accounts and all this kind of stuff, that they were fallow because they were never able to execute because other things happened. Death Stranding was created while he left Konami. Death Stranding was made and all the rest. So I will say that I think it is Kojima. And the reason I do think it is because I've said this in the past. It's not that I necessarily feel it. It's one of those things where I look at all the evidence and I can't dissuade myself in a reasonable way that it isn't because of the Hideo name thing and the flag and the connection to Death Stranding. And there's just too much. It's just too much. Jeff Keighley, and I don't know if you saw USP, Shuhei Yoshida had a little winky face response on something a few weeks ago with the game. And it's too, no one knows this person. Like, his name is Hideo Kojima in the Google Translator. And again, people are like, well, that's not a right translation. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's what Google Translate says it. And that's what you would use if you put it to a translator. It doesn't matter if it's accurate Japanese or Turkish. So I don't know, man. I feel like there's got to be more to this. And I feel like it's going to be exciting. And I feel like if it's not, to Dustin's point, I could understand Sony not saying anything publicly. But certainly at some point, if something's amiss, you would go to them privately. Private conversations happen behind the scenes all the time and say, you got to not do this. Don't do it. Or you'd think Konami would be like, you're getting too close to the line with our licenses. So maybe you want to chill a little bit. But it doesn't seem like those things have even happened behind the scenes because he won't shut the fuck up. So I look and the PS5 preload app thing. What is that? No one does that. That's not a thing that's ever happened. So I think we all agree something is up.
So yeah.
Something also to keep in mind, we've been hearing rumors for a long time about a Metal Gear Solid remake from Bluepoint.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's just another angle to also look at this. I mean, it could be like a partial Kojima situation where, let's say Bluepoint is remaking that game. Kojima has connections with Sony. Maybe he is being brought on as like a associate type role where he's like helping oversee the project in collaboration with Bluepoint or something.
Yeah, like a consultant type deal where he's like, oh yeah.
Right.
I think it's what I said, I think, on one of our shows previously, which is that Sony, I think, would be the best intermediary to solve the problem between Konami and Kojima, or be the appropriate bridge to keep them apart while they can all make money together. Kojima is no dummy, and he knows that Konami holds the keys to what he is best known for, and that ultimately, I think he's going to have to bury the hatchet with them if he wants not only access to Metal Gear, but other stuff like Snatcher and Zone of the Enders. And it's not like he only made Metal Gear. I mean, there's other stuff that they control too. And I think there are other pieces of interesting information. That accidental leak of the Bluepoint logo from the Sony Japan Twitter account, that asset might be made for a reason. You have to assume that would be a massive miscommunication. And to just make that image and post it, I can understand making it and oops, wrong one. So there's that. But then there's Bluepoint kind of seemingly reiterating that they're independent. And I just don't know what to make of it. But I look at the entire situation holistically, and I can't help but feel that there's something big here and something interesting, and it will be a disaster for everyone involved if it's not what it seems to be. And I just think it's too much. So as much as I always feel like the worst possible outcome is likely, like the thing that's least exciting, the thing that's least unusual. So that's where I'm going to default all the time. But my mind simply won't let me do it. It reminds me of like God. Like I would love to really, truly believe in God, like really believe in the sanctity of God. And like I can talk to him and pray and all that stuff. But my mind just won't let me do that. It's the same thing here. And we'll find out. So that's my gut check. I guess I'm the most bullish of everyone.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll do it for you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see here. Oh, it's time to talk about what we're playing. Chris, I want to start with you because I know you're playing the Halo Infinite tech preview. This is a PlayStation podcast, but it doesn't matter. I want to hear about it. And also, you were on Defining Duke Ultimate to talk about it, which is Sacred Symbols Plus's sister show from Mr. Matty Plays and Lord Cognito. So what did you, or what talk to me about Halo?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get super into it because we do have a whole episode of Defining Duke about it that you could check out. Which it's going to be far more in depth than I'm going to be able to do here. But the tech preview is over now. It was like, I think 3 or 4 days over the weekend. And long story short, man, it's real good. Like, it's shockingly good. Like, I did not expect, especially with just the development hell that this thing has kind of been in, losing several directors, several delays. I was not expecting it to be so genuinely fun. And it reminded me of something where, like, we talk about this sometimes on the podcast too, where, like, man, first-person shooters are just so good, and it would be so nice to have, like, a Sony first-person shooter, like a proper first-party, just something to play, something that's easy to step into, something that's fun and, like, deceptively complex and simple, and it just made me feel like, yeah, Sony is missing something by not having something like this, or like not having this genre as fleshed out as it seems like even their biggest competitors are doing, you know. But it's super good. It plays really well. Granted, it was a tech preview, so they were like, you know, it was like some stability issues and stuff, but I think this game's going to be a big deal when it comes out, like, sincerely. I think this is probably going to be a massive thing, and I don't think PlayStation can afford not to pay attention to it in some way, because it's good. I'm going to be making a video about it, like, specifically breaking down, like, what works, what doesn't, but overwhelmingly positive is basically how I'm feeling about it.
It looks great. And yeah. I was reading the feedback people were putting out there, and there was an authentic amount of excitement, and I'm really glad that you enjoy it because I know how much that series means to you. Mm-hmm. So we'll hear more about that, and I'm in total agreement with you. It's been 8 years since Sony has released a first party FPS, and I would argue it's been 6 years since they've released any sort of first or second party shooter of any kind in the form of the Order 1886, which was a third person cover-based shooter. And I know that other games you shoot in Uncharted and Days Gone, but they're not shooters. You know, those were shooters of varying quality, of course. So it would be cool. It would be cool. And, you know, I know they're getting in with Predator in the second party and all that, but I agree with you. I feel like we want Resistance. I feel like Killzone or something has to make a comeback. It's just weird to leave this hill unfought, especially when their arch rival rather is about to release something big, and the first really truly big Xbox game in years, which is
in a long time.
Yeah, in and of itself a big deal that I know a lot of people are excited about. So, Dustin, you've been playing Ender Lilies and Roller Coaster Tycoon, so talk to me about those.
Right, yeah. So my parents were here for the past, let's see, from Wednesday to Tuesday. So I almost got no gaming time in. So that's why I did play. There's a surprise. This may shock people, but I've been playing Roller Coaster Tycoon on the iPad, which I don't play games on mobile or iPad, but this game is awesome. It is very well done. It translates very well. And so that's the game that I was just playing when, like, you know, Holly and my mom like to watch, like, this person's restoring their house for the next 5 years on YouTube. So they would have that on, and I would be playing Roller Coaster Tycoon on the iPad, and it was just great. But Ender Lilies, I made the mistake where I went to go play last night after not playing for almost a week, and I was like, uh-oh. I know that I started this level, but I was like, Gandalf, I have no memory of this place. So I need to, like, I don't know. I'm too far in for me to restart, but I just have to go through the painful, like, hour of being like, okay, here's, you know, recalibrate. But I am very excited. The Back for Blood, is this in the news? The beta starts tonight, and I got my beta code. Oh, well, there's an open beta. I think we talked about it last week, actually. Yeah. So we got it covered. The open beta for that starts tonight, which, by the way, Chris, I have an extra beta code if you would like.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll send that your way. But I think we're going to play that tonight. So I feel like I was a little bitter over the weekend, honestly. You know, everyone's having fun playing Halo, talking about how great it is. I tried to play Splitgate because that beta was also going on. Couldn't get in. Anytime I sat down to play it put me in a queue. I would wait about 3 to 5 minutes. Never got in, which good for them that apparently it's doing very well, that people want to play it. But I was like, I'm not into waiting in line to play games in my own home. Like, I'm not going to do that. So, but other than that, you know, not very much, but excited to play Back 4 Blood.
Cool. Yeah, we'll hear more about that next week. I'm a true believer in both CBD and THC, substances derived from marijuana that have incredibly useful properties that have helped me for years. The thing is, these two substances are different, and it's CBD that I believe would be most useful to most people, including probably you. And there's no better way I like to take my CBD than with Feels CBD. CBD stands for cannabidiol, and it's a perfectly legal substance derived from the marijuana plant that can help you ease stress, calm your anxiety, alleviate bodily aches and pains, and even help you find the sleep that eludes you. Unlike its cousin THC, which remains illegal or under medical authorization in many Western localities, CBD doesn't get you stoned. In fact, there's no high at all. Rather, the beauty of CBD is in what it helps you not feel. Anxious, scared, hurt, tired. It really does work. I really do consider it a wonder substance, and I truly believe that Feels CBD is the best way for newcomers to get through the door, and for old-timers like me to get the best product at the best price with the best service. So here's what you do. Begin by going to feels.com/symbols. That's feals.com/SYMBOLS. Doing so will net you 50% off your first month of a Feels membership with free shipping, so you can see what it's all about at a truly affordable price. But how do you know what to take? Well, Feels has a hotline manned by real people that can help guide you through the process. In short, Feels comes in the form of a tincture that you put under your tongue. You'll feel relief in seconds, but what you need to figure out is what dosage you're looking for, and if you're at a loss, they can help. They'll ship you new product monthly so that you're never without, and you can of course pause or cancel anytime. So give Feels a try and see what CBD can do for you. It's truly helped me, and I think it can help you too. To become a Feels member and get 50% off your first month's membership of Feels with free shipping, go to feels.com/symbols. That's feels.com/symbols. So I started Ender Lilies on your recommendation, Dustin, and other people were saying it too. And it's $25, I think. So a little pricey, but
yeah,
it's really pretty. It's cool. We were talking about it last week. You play as a little girl who has no inherent strengths. Instead, when you attack, you're using like one of her spirits to attack, and like a sword or like a mace or something. It's pretty cool. And it's a Metroidvania, although it's one of those Metroidvanias that annoys me a little bit in that it doesn't have full like left, right. It's like goes in and out as well. You know what I'm talking about? Where you're going back. It's like, press L2, you go through a door back and then you're in another. I hate that shit. But it doesn't affect the map. It's not one of those weird maps that you have to read that way. So that's kind of cool. Massive Colin complaint, can't stop the clock in this game. It's just another one of those games. And these games inherently take me longer to get through. And I'll tell you why, because I'll play them and I play and then I'm like, well, I want to pause this and like go to the bathroom or pause this and like go dick around for a little while. Guess I'm gonna have to shut the whole game down. And when a game can just stay paused, I just play it all day, like in and out. But when it's going to ruin the clock, I find that relevant because I want to know how long I played. And I don't understand how games this is what we keep fucking talking about, doing the last little bit right. It's important. Why have a clock if it's not accurate? The clock is just telling you how long the game's been on. That's useless. And in fact, the PlayStation tells you that already.
Yeah.
So get your shit together out there with this stuff. It's just like, holy Christ. If you pause the game, the clock stops. What is this, soccer? Where the clock just keeps going endlessly no matter what for any reason? All right. So fun game nonetheless. Also, we can finally talk more openly about Trigger Witch from our friends at Rainbite, written by my buddy John O'Peck. First of all, a lot of Sacred Symbols references in this game. I don't know if you saw that, Dustin. There's also a trophy called Sacred Symbols. And I think Jono's basically confirmed that the main character, Colette, who's named after someone else, obviously, they sometimes call her Kal. And that's for me because that's what my brother calls me. So and that's what my family really calls me, but he knows that from Knockback. So there's a lot of cool references in there. So I'm a little biased. I'm also in the credits. And are you in the credits too, Dustin? Did you play it already?
I have not gotten to the credits. So I don't know.
I didn't even see, but so obviously there's all this bias there, but I really feel like this is a really fun twin stick shooter. Well, actually, yeah, it is a twin stick shooter, right?
Well,
I think now based on our.
Do you shoot
No,
with the sticks?
yeah, you
aim.
shoot, you aim. So it's not technically a twin stick shooter, but they call it that. I guess we have to have this conversation more deeply.
We might.
But nonetheless, it's really funny. And I don't know how far you got into it, Dustin, but the game changes so much, the story, that it's one of those, I always say, you will never guess where the game goes. Like, you'll never, ever, 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 ever guess it. You just have to play it.
This intrigues me.
Yeah, it's cool. It's so funny, too. Like, it's funny and serious, but when it happens, I'm like, this is fucking dope. This is so cool. And they did a really nice job with it. So check it out. I think I platinumed it. It's my 122nd platinum, but I think I platinumed it in about 8.5 hours. There's no guide. You don't really need one. So a very, very simple upgrade system, bunch of different weapons to select. Zelda-ish in its overworld layout, and then you're going into various dungeons. So that kind of is their pocket over at Rainbite. That was kind of the way Reverie was as well. So shout out to that game. And I have to just say, we have a letter from the audience that I want to read in a moment, but there are just a couple of games on my radar that I'm really excited to play. And I think we talked about it maybe last week, but that game Dodgeball Academia comes out the time we're recording this, and I want to play that game so bad. It looks so fucking fun. It's like a turn-based JRPG that's like Dodgeball, and it's super cool. So I want to check that out. And there's another game I want to check out too. And Defy by Default wrote in and he said, "Hello, gents. This comment is mostly for Colin, though I'm sure Dustin would enjoy it as well. I'm not sure if you have had the time to check out Chris Tales, but it's certainly worth your time. A charming turn-based RPG that I think will be very much up your alley. I've been enjoying it on PS5, and the art, style, music, and story is exactly what I want from a 90s throwback RPG. Might be a great game to hold you over until one of the bigger releases comes out. Cheers as always from Canada." Thank you for that. Dustin, has this game been on your radar? Because it's on mine. I feel like it's a little bit of a time sink, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. I actually already have it installed thanks to Xbox Game Pass on my Series X.
Ooh.
Just because I saw it on there. And I know Ben spoke very highly of this game. He got to preview it at E3 whenever the last one was. And he said that he thought it was very good. And I've been hearing the same things brought up about this game. And I definitely want to check it out at some point. I wonder how long. Have you heard how long it is? Is it like a big commitment? You never know. With
the pricing indicates that I feel like when you have a game over $20 or over, and it's a role playing game, I always assume it's got to be 25 plus hours. But I don't know how long to beat has it on there or anything.
How long to beat says main story 24 hours or main story plus extras 29 hours.
God, Colin's so smart.
Wow.
Now, by the way, because you brought up Game Pass, and we should bring up for our Game Pass users out there, Dodgeball Academia is also on Game Pass. So, if you want to check that out, you can do so. The game I just recommended. But yeah, Chris Tales looks really cool. It reminds me of that game Crosscode in some way, which I also want to get to. Was on PS4 a couple of years ago, and they brought it to PS5 just recently. Another kind of 90s inspired role playing game. I'm getting back. I'm rolling back after a couple of weeks of being a little bit out, and so Trigger Witch kind of invigorated me. And so, yeah, I'm feeling good. So that's what we're playing right now. We'll have more to say, obviously, every week moving forward. It's time, boys, to get into the news. And I wanted to start with this. I don't know that this is the biggest news relevant to our audience, but certainly I think it has to be the biggest news. Number one, Grand Theft Auto 5 has hit an incredible sales milestone. The game, first launched in 2013, has surpassed 150 million copies sold. This puts it firmly in the realm of second place when it comes to the best-selling games of all time. Microsoft's Minecraft powerhouse sits comfortably at 200 million sold. But at 150 million, GTA 5 has sold more than twice as many copies as the third best-selling non-bundled game of all time, which is PUBG. And that sits at 70 million sold. From there, the fall is steep as you get into largely bundled-in fare like Wii Sports and Super Mario Brothers, along with some notable bright spots like Pokemon Red and Blue, Mario Kart 8, and Terraria. GTA 5, which first came to PlayStation 3 and was later ported to PS4 the following year, is receiving a current-gen PlayStation 5 launch on November 11th. It's the final Grand Theft Auto game in a franchise which began in the late 90s that saw a ton of releases squeezed into a decade-long period and has largely existed off of GTA Online. Its mega popular online component, which is up a staggering 72% in player base growth over the last 24 months. Take-Two, which owns Rockstar as well as the 2K brand and other imprints, also reported other sales figures alongside GTA 5's. Rockstar's ambitious Red Dead Redemption 2, launched on PS4 in 2018, has surpassed 38 million copies sold, making it the 9th best-selling non-bundled console and PC game of all time. Civilization 6, meanwhile, which launched in 2016 and which came to PS4 in 2019, surpassed 11 million copies sold. In a conversation with website GamesIndustry.biz, Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick noted that the publisher intends on bringing to market 20 games each year over the next few years. All right, Chris, what do you think? GTA 5, 150 million copies sold, making it the second best-selling game of all time. It's a pretty incredible number. I tweeted this out, but just to put it into reference, this is more copies than there are NES, SNES, and N64 units in existence.
That is so insane to me. Like, it's so weird because, like, Grand Theft Auto, like, dude, like, we understand. The video game industry is very familiar with Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto is very popular. It's a big deal. But, like, this is so random, I feel. Like, something about Grand Theft Auto 5 doesn't seem to me like a $150 million or 150 million units sold experience. Like, I remember playing GTA 5 and thinking, you know, this is a pretty high quality game, but it's kind of, you know, it's fine. You know, like, I wasn't particularly enamored with GTA 5 at all. Like, I didn't finish the story. I think I maybe got through like 25% of it. And like, I played a little bit of GTA Online and I was like, yeah, this is kind of neat, I guess. I don't know why I have to pay car insurance in a video game, but that's, you know, I guess that's kind of cool. And then I just sort of fell off it in like, I think I played it for like 2 months. So to see that it's like 72% player base growth in the last like 24 months and 150 million units. So this is just one of these things that it does not gel with my brain at all. I'm happy for them. God bless them. They're rolling in dough, but I would have never bet on this, you know, before the game came out. Like, somebody was like, if somebody said put money on the fact whether or not this is going to make sell 150 million units, I'm not going to be taking that bet, you know?
I was thinking about it this way, Dustin, that if they sold every one of those every copy sold for $1, they would have made the cost of making the game back. So, I mean, that's literally, it's an insane amount of games. And I agree with Chris that it's like, who's buying this stuff? But they are. And even if the average price of a GTA 5, let's say like over time has been $20, I mean, that's billions of dollars in revenue.
Yeah, and then you got the microtransactions, like the shark cards that people are buying. Like, that's insane.
Of course. I mean, this thing is printing money, and it's no surprise that they have no interest in. I mean, they are apparently working on GTA 6 for mid-decade release, but it's no surprise that they're not interested and that they realize that they might as well. I think that what they want to do is make one more cash cow that like exists in perpetuity, and it sounds like that's what they're going to try to ultimately do, which is to make this like totally modular city or town or landscape that exists forever. And GTA Online will be that off of GTA 6 or whatever in 2050. But I don't blame them for looking at this and saying like, why the fuck would we? But the most urgent problem for them now is probably like, we need to make sure that these guys can get into the new game when we release it. It's an incredible number. What do you think?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking, there was one point that they gave it away for free on Epic Games Store, but again, it's still, that wouldn't amount to like, it's still a insanely high number. I'm trying to think did they ever bundle it with PS4 ever? I feel like
they did. I think, yeah.
Right.
I don't think this counts copies that are given away though.
Oh,
I do think it counts
even
copies.
better.
I don't think that would be specious at best. I don't think that they would do that.
Right.
I don't know that would even be legal actually, because they're a publicly traded company.
The crazy thing, I just think about this game, and it's weird because in a lot of my circles, I don't know anyone who plays this game still. But actually, I do know one person that plays GTA Online. My very good friend Brandon, friend of the show, his dad has been playing GTA Online since it came out on PS3 or 360. And then he played it through the entire PS4 generation. And he played some other games in between, like he played the Arkham games and stuff like that. And now he has a PS5 that he continues to play GTA Online. And my friend Brandon's like, he has like all of the cars, he has the penthouse, and he doesn't like, blow a bunch of money on shark cards. He just legitimately plays the game that much that he has all this stuff. So it's just it's crazy to think about. I think was it Jaffe? He posted a tweet that was like, man, Rockstar beat Zuckerberg to the metaverse. Like they created this ubiquitous, like really popular online sort of not life simulation, but this thing where, I mean, dude, especially if you check out the RP servers and stuff, have you guys seen this on Twitch, like GTA role playing? It's insane. It's actually really entertaining. Like there's people that like role play entire lives within GTA Online, and there's like gangs, and there's people that run the casinos, or a guy that works at a mechanic. There's mob activity and stuff like that. It's all RP'd with very strict rules.
That's cool.
On GTA Online. It's very, very neat. So you got to imagine Rockstar's thinking about that too for the next version, to have built-in RP features with very strict rules and such. But congrats to them. It sucks that it came at the cost of single player DLC, but I get it from a business perspective.
Well, we wish them the very best, and I do want to. I mean, it sounds so crazy to not give this its proper accolades, but Red Dead at 38 million, Red Dead Redemption 2, I should say, is incredible as well. 9th best-selling non-bundled game of all time, and just a true tour de force, and the reason I think why people want more Grand Theft Auto, because we saw what they could do now with storytelling and all of this. And that's why I say that I think that Dan Houser leaving and starting his own studio, which they still haven't really talked about, is why we should be excited, because I feel like that's what we're going to get. I mean, clearly he wants to do single player games. So congratulations to Rockstar. Now, this would have usually been the lead story. Number 2, multiple sources are reporting what appears to be fairly obvious, and that's that Horizon Forbidden West will not launch in 2021. Sources like Bloomberg all say the similar thing, something similar rather. Guerrilla's follow-up to the 2017 smash hit Horizon Zero Dawn won't be ready until 2022 on either PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. You'll recall that around E3, the leader of PlayStation's first-party teams, Herman Hulst, candidly noted that they didn't know yet if the game would come out in 2021 as intended or be pushed until next year. However, those in the know saw that for what it was, an admission that it wouldn't be ready in time. The game, which was first revealed in mid-2020, has been in development at Sony-owned Dutch team Guerrilla, and its development began in earnest in 2018. Indeed, it started as a PlayStation 4 game only before migrating over to PlayStation 5 midway through development, making it a less controversial cross-gen game than the likes of God of War Ragnarok from Santa Monica Studio. Horizon Zero Dawn, which was at first a PS4 exclusive and which has since come to PC, introduced players to female robot dinosaur hunter Aloy, and was Guerrilla's first game outside of its Killzone FPS franchise since 2004, and its first game outside of FPS since it was known as Lost Boy Games in the early 2000s. At that point, they were making like Game Boy Color games. The team is also the keeper of Sony's valuable proprietary engine and toolset known as Decima, which a selection of games ranging from 2013's Shadowfall to 2019's Death Stranding were built on. This isn't a huge surprise. I was on the record weeks ago on the show saying that the game's not going to come out this year. And I felt like Herman Hulst basically told us that, because knowing that a game could use more time means that you've now put it into the record, which means that if the game is not up to snuff, people are going to be like, why didn't you delay it? And so now you basically force yourself into a delay, which is exactly why I think he said it to begin with. But that's a little more calculating than we need to get into right now. Chris, no Horizon this year, which means that we are going to get nothing from first or second party this year, because certainly Gran Turismo and God of War are even further back, unless they come out of nowhere with something, but they won't, I don't think.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about this?
I mean, I'm not disappointed. I'm never going to be disappointed at a delay. We still got, I think Kenna's been pushed into fall. Is that true?
Yeah, it's September now, I think.
Yeah. So at least we'll have things to play, I'm sure. And there's still, and to be quite honest, there's so many titles coming out, like multi-platform titles coming out this fall that I don't think will be any like, I don't think it'll be like a particularly like, I don't think there'll be like a void of anything to play. You know, we've still got plenty of stuff to play. And if anything shows that a launch or like a fall without any much, a fall season with no, you know, good launch titles or good, not launch titles, but good first party games to come out, it didn't affect Xbox that much. You know, Xbox is like selling pretty well now, you know? So like, I feel like Sony can afford like 1 year where they don't have something crazy for the fall, you know, especially with like Call of Duty and Battlefield and all this other stuff that's going to be taking up that spot. We have Kenna too, which looks gorgeous. You know, I'm not too worried about it, but it is kind of interesting to me that they kind of promised these 2 games this year and then both of them got pushed out. I think that's interesting, just from like because we all knew that God of War was not 2021 bound. So the fact that like Horizon, which seemed like a more certain bet earlier on, is now in 2022, I think that's a little concerning and probably like should be paid attention to a little bit. But I'm not worried about PlayStation standing with like, you know, one fall with no like proper first party exclusives, especially when the fall is already so packed. And there's also like Deathloop coming up soon. Like there's stuff in the ecosystem to play around with in time, and it's better that these games get the proper, you know, development time they need to be actually good than rushed out. You know,
I totally agree. And I'm looking at Game Informer's release schedule right now, trying to kind of find a path through for the rest of the year for myself. So Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut comes August 20th. I'm not going to play the PS5 version, but I'll download the DLC and play that. And then we have pretty much nothing else for me that month. But then, yeah, in September, you move into September, and The Medium will come to PlayStation 5, which I do want to check out. That game Fist comes, Forge and Shadow Torch comes on September 7th, and that went gold, so that's definitely going to make it. And Tales of Arise comes September 10th, and then Deathloop September 14th. So you're right. I mean, there's stuff. I'm really interested to see how Diablo 2 does, the resurrected version, now that everything happened with Blizzard that comes out in September. So you're right. There are games coming, but a lot of the bigger stuff, like Back 4 Blood, I'm not going to fuck with. Battlefield, I'm not going to fuck with, but those are big games for everyone. I will be playing Far Cry 6 in October. And yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I'm looking here. That's basically it. Oh, Advanced Wars 1 and 2 comes to Switch in December. That's going to be tantalizing for me, to be perfectly honest. And Dying Light 2, December 7th.
Yeah, in December. So you got a pretty good amount of things to play, you know. Are you like how do you feel about the fact that like, oh, weird, no fall Sony launch?
Yeah, they usually stay out of the fall anyway, but it's just weird that they're going to go this long without something. It makes me wonder. I mean, you can't question any of the choices they're making because they're selling so well, but knowing this internally, maybe bouncing Ratchet a little further out, letting them polish that game a little bit more would have made more sense. Release the game in September, release Horizon at the 5th year anniversary will be 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah, the 5th year anniversary of Horizon Zero Dawn in February. And I feel like maybe what we're going to end up getting is one or both of Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War director's cuts in the fall on PS5 to fill in the gap for people a little bit. And Horizon obviously leading into and teasing the next game, and then God of War will tease the next game. Maybe that will come later, but I'm pretty confident in that we haven't seen the last of this. I mean, they're clearly ramping up to get this out. So it might not be as empty as it seems, but it is strange, and I'm disappointed in it. Although I think they, again, could take advantage of saying like Horizon Forbidden West will come out 5 years to the date of when Horizon Zero Dawn came out. And if you pre-order it, you get Horizon Zero Dawn Director's Cut for free, which comes with the with the Glacial Wilds, or whatever the hell they call it. So that DLC. So Dustin, how are you feeling about Horizon's delay? No Forbidden West. Probably, I would assume February is what we're looking at for this game.
Right. I was thinking, I looked at the details here because I was trying to figure out the timeline. So that state of play was in May. And then in July, the Netherlands reimposed work from home due to COVID. And I'm wondering if that's the main reason why we're seeing this delay, is that going back to working from home probably put a big damper on things, especially when you're polishing things up and finalizing things. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just disappointing, but like Chris said, it's not a big deal. Sony traditionally, as you said, stays out of the fall. So there's plenty of other things to play. It'll be just really interesting when they finally decide to talk. But you have to imagine, as we said, maybe between now and next episode, we'll have news. It feels like it could be any moment now that Sony comes out and says, hey, we've got a state of play. Like there's the best-selling game of this year still hasn't even been announced yet, which is most likely Call of Duty. I guess
Vanguard, right? Is that what they're going to call it? Is that the name?
I don't know. Was that just a code name, or is that actually?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the rumor. Yeah, they said it would be in a familiar setting. I feel like it's going to be a World War II game or something. We'll see.
Dude,
Man,
they're
that
going
would
to
be
get
so
destroyed
weird.
this year, I think.
I think
Maybe
so too.
not.
Like,
It's Call of Duty though. You can't. It's hard. You got to not betting against Call of Duty is a very dangerous game.
Yeah, no, totally. I wonder, man, with all the Activision stuff though happening, like I wonder like how that reveals. Because you remember when? Do you remember when? I think it was like whatever Call of Duty came out with Battlefield 1. When those trailers came out, I think the Call of Duty trailer was like one of the most disliked trailers in like. Because granted, it went to sell, a lot, but there was a very different circumstance. That was just general, like, oh, this game looks better, so we're gonna like it and not buy it.
Right.
But this is like a weird, interesting situation where they kind of look really bad if they like, hey, in the midst of all this, hey, here's a trailer for our next thing. Like, you have to do it because it's a business, but like it's going to come across as really, really tone deaf to do, and that's definitely going to be reflected in the reception of that announcement. So I'm really curious about. I'm so curious to see that.
It's just a total storm of. I mean, the backlash with everything going on with Activision-Blizzard. Battlefield looks like looks very promising. There's more excitement for Battlefield now than in the last, I don't know, at least 5 years, right?
I think so.
In addition, we're seeing all these rumors that this year's Call of Duty has been in a rough spot for a while, and that it's maybe going to be a lower confidence release, but I don't know. Who knows? Call of Duty, though, always sells. No matter what. You can have the most disliked trailer on YouTube and it will still sell.
Right.
So,
yeah.
That's
no, for sure.
The internet is just not a good barometer of anything. Not to get randomly political, but I don't know, just as an example,
right.
There was an Ohio congressional special election in some, I don't know, urban district in Cleveland, maybe, or something. Anyway, there were these two Democrats running, and Nina Turner and Chantel Brown, I think, were their names. And Nina Turner is like a huge accolade of Bernie Sanders, and has like hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers and is all over the place or whatever. And then the Chantel Brown woman was kind of lower key. She had like a few thousand Twitter followers, no check mark. She's just like a local delegate in their legislature or whatever. And then so everyone's like, oh, of course Nina Turner is going to win, and she got all the money and all this, but come election day, Chantel Brown won. So you just never, the internet just doesn't have the power that it thinks it does, because it's not like in politics, it's not localized enough. Here, it's not localized enough either. It's easy to be mad about Call of Duty if you're not going to buy it. And it's especially easy if you don't buy Call of Duty anyway. The only people whose anger matters are the 25 million people who buy Call of Duty. And
you're right.
Any of them they're certainly not going to be like, yeah, I'm going to still play it. They're just going to go buy it. So I will be interested to see how it does, especially in light of Battlefield coming back. I feel like it couldn't be any better for EA. The environment couldn't be any better for them to finally stick a knife in Activision, which they have never been able to do ever. With quality, they certainly have done it. I know people at Bad Company, and I like Battlefield 1 a lot, but this would be a time for them to truly break out. But it requires, as what we were saying earlier, guys, it requires the speaking of the wallet. Call of Duty is a way of life for you, which it is for a lot of people. It's a big ask. So we'll see what happens.
It's true.
VPNs, or virtual private networks, sound sophisticated, and they are, but they're also becoming increasingly essential in our ever-connected world. They can help keep your hardware, data, and connections safe, sure, but they can also act as incredibly useful geographic spoofers so that you can sign into local websites, streaming services, and more from all around the world. My friends at NordVPN have made an elite virtual private network that nails both security and utility. And by going to nordvpn.com/symbolsvpn, that's nordvpn.com/symbolsvpn, you can get a great deal on a 2-year subscription with a bonus gift at a huge discount. So here's the rub. I used to travel a lot during my games media days, and I'd always be on sketchy airport and hotel Wi-Fi. Maybe you can relate. Anyone and their mother could sign into these connections, and it makes your data inherently unsafe. By activating NordVPN, however, I'd be given an extra serious layer of security so that random hacker X doesn't focus his or her attention on poor old me, and rather picks on someone else a little less protected. But for the Sacred Symbols audience, the real beauty of NordVPN is going to be in its special geography bending capabilities. And this is the stuff I really love, because it shows just how potentially and staggeringly useful it can be for gamers, streaming subscribers, and more. Imagine, like me, you're American. I'm speaking to you right now from Central Virginia. But with NordVPN, I could trick my computer connection into thinking I'm in, say, the UK. Why is that useful? Because suddenly I have access to their Netflix, their Hulu, their streaming sports. Now multiply this by the 59 countries you can have NordVPN pretend you're from, and your eyes should light up. The possibilities are endless, especially when you consider you can connect NordVPN to your phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, and even router simultaneously under a single account. So go to nordvpn.com/symbolsvpn or simply use the code SymbolsVPN at checkout and get your 2-year subscription to NordVPN at a steep discount with a special gift included. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee too, so there's no risk for you to try it for yourself and see just what it can do for you. So again, go to nordvpn.com/symbolsvpn or use the code SymbolsVPN at checkout. That's nordvpn.com/symbolsvpn. Number 3, as we already knew, the popular PlayStation 4 exclusive game Ghost of Tsushima is receiving a so-called Director's Cut release on PlayStation 5, and that launches right around the corner on August 20th. It will come packing a DLC expansion exploring the smaller Iki Island that we mentioned earlier. However, this DLC can be purchased a la carte on PS4. That's where I'll be playing it. We know all of that. Well, there's more news on the Legends front. Legends, as you may recall, is Ghost of Tsushima's post-release multiplayer suite that's free for all owners of the game. Legends launched in mid-October of last year and came packing its own trophies and more. However, it's clear that the popularity of this mode took Sony-owned Team Sucker Punch by surprise, and they're reacting by releasing a standalone version of Legends on September 3rd at the cost of $20 USD. This option exists for those who want to play this expansive suite of content without purchasing the core game, and it doesn't affect Legends' free-to-play functionality for anyone who purchases and owns the game already or will in the future. However, if Legends strikes your fancy, and you want to buy the rest of the single-player game after buying Legends, you can do so for an additional $40 on PS4 or $50 on PS5. Alongside the standalone release comes new content for Legends, along with modes, gear, trophies, and even a new level cap. Ghost of Tsushima is widely considered PlayStation 4's exclusive swan song, launched in late summer of 2020. It comes from Sucker Punch, the Sony first-party team best known for its Sly Cooper trilogy on PS2 and its infamous trilogy spanning PS3 and PS4. Chris, I got to get your take on this. I was fascinated by this. I like this idea. The more I read about it, the more I liked it, because they're basically using it as a backdoor to get into the main game. And they're saying, like, you pay a little bit and you get Legends and you pay the rest if you want the free game that would have included Legends. Therefore, you're technically not really out anything. And if you don't want to spend the extra money on the regular game, then you don't have to do it. So I actually quite like this solution. We've been making fun of them for being so obtuse with their pricing models, but this makes a lot of sense to me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think this is super smart. I think it's really wise to I think it's wise to separate these two things. They are already kind of separate packages, even like in the main game when you like swap between them, like the two separate trophy lists and all that. They exist kind of on their own, even within the game. So like I think it's smart to court it off and like, hey, you know, if you're not interested in a single player game, then here's this, you know, multiplayer samurai game, of which like what competition is there on that front? Like none. Like there's no multiplayer samurai game. So like here you go. Here's a unique experience for you, and you're no doubt. I mean, Ghost of Tsushima Legends is like it's good. It's really good for like a free mode in in addition to like a really great campaign. But like, and while it is fun, it doesn't have the meat, I think, to sustain people for like a particularly long time. Like I don't see people necessarily playing this like every single day or like every single week for years on end. So it's kind of wise to kind of get people into that gameplay loop. It's like, this is fun, but like these arenas and this specific like mode kind of isn't doing it for me. I can spend like a little bit more and maybe get this massive open world suite of like curated single player and like just design, like actual designed play spaces with like narrative and like side quests and stuff. I think it's a lot more tantalizing to somebody who maybe isn't super big into like single player games if the barrier of entry is like significantly lower than it otherwise would be. So I think this is super smart. This is great.
It reminds me of I want to promote this, although I'm sure a lot of our patrons have already heard it. I did a Sacred Symbols Plus episode with a guy named Joel Demby, who is a Canadian Paralympian. And we were talking about, he's an advocate for accessibility in the games industry. It's episode 106, and we actually just put it up for everyone on YouTube because we thought it was an important conversation. But in there, what I found so fascinating about our talk was that he was making me for the first time see that the fight for accessibility, in quotes, is really from many different angles. And commercial accessibility is another of these interesting angles. Figuring out a way to get someone in the door and still pay you is going to be the lifeblood of this new ecosystem we're emerging into, where it's going to be subscription based and microtransaction laden and all of the rest. And so realizing in hindsight, oh, we have something special here and we can actually extract some value out of it is a really nice way, I think, Dustin, to bring Ghost of Tsushima back to the forefront, because we always say games sell the most in the very beginning, and then sales almost always trail off to almost virtually nothing compared to the way things sell at the very beginning. This is a way for them to say like, hey, remember us? And while you wait for whatever we're going to do next and you have this DLC pack we're doing and all of this, you can also get involved in Ghost this way. And I think it makes it clear that this is going to be an IP that Sucker Punch is going to focus on now for a while.
Right. I think, dude, I love the idea of just it being 20. It reminds me of being in high school and like all your friends are playing this game, and then they want you to buy it so you can play the multiplayer, but it's like it's a big commitment for $60. And I specifically remember this happening to me with the first Borderlands game, and then I ended up by the time that I got it, no one was interested in playing it anymore, and I did not enjoy playing it by myself at all. So I got kind of burned on that, and it's not really a one-to-one comparison, but just thinking about if you have a bunch of buddies that play this game, $20 is enough that it's like, you know what? I can check that out for $20 and play with the boys. And you know, if you like it, like you said, it's that the way to get someone interested into the world or the gameplay loop, which is what Chris was saying. And that's just, I don't know, smart business to me.
I agree. And I'll be interested to see how the director's cut does as well. I'll be really interested to track the MPD numbers and the PSN tracking for sales and how Ghost of Tsushima bounces back up. We won't get specific numbers, but we will be able to at least be able to ascertain its performance. So that'll be fun. And then we can kind of figure out if we do expect to see more of this. And I think we will. Horizon and all the rest. And obviously they acquired Nixes to bring these games to PC as well. So who knows if they can also be used as leverage to port these games and not straddle their original studios with them. We'll see in time. Number 4, a YouTube channel called PSVR Without Parole released a video, as relayed by multiple sources, that seems to divulge some new information about PlayStation VR's successor, which has been revealed for a nebulous 2022 release. Here's what apparently happened. According to this channel, Sony held a private and secret event for PSVR 2 devs, and this is where the information comes from. For starters, Sony is internally referring to PSVR 2 as NGVR, or Next Gen VR. If this sounds familiar, it's because they had a similar naming tag for Vita, which was revealed as the Next Generation Portable, or NGP, before being named before launch. A similar thing will likely happen here. Now, this symposium confirmed what we already knew. The headset will support a 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, higher than Oculus Quest 2's, and not only will it use an OLED display, but it will be backed by HDR as well, solving the fuzzy colors, lack of darkness or deepness, etc. on the original PSVR. That's 4000 by 2040 for combined resolution with eye tracking and foveated rendering, according to website Upload VR. The field of view will apparently be 110 degrees, 10 degrees more than 2016's PlayStation VR, and the controllers are also as sophisticated as thought, including having multiple capacitive touch sensors in addition to buttons. At this meeting, Sony told devs that they're on the hunt for AAA-like projects, and Upload VR uses the example of Resident Evil 7 on PS4, which played all the way through on PSVR as well, is ultimately what they're seeking. Aiming for a 2022 launch, we'll apparently hear firm release timing and pricing next year. Dustin, what do you make of this? This is the NGVR. It brings me back to the NGP days, those heady days when we didn't know what the fuck this thing was called. If you look at old PlayStation Vita pictures, you might remember that it said PlayStation on the bottom and not PS Vita, which it would say later. And that's when it was called the NGP.
Right. Dude, this is really exciting. I also saw a clip on Twitter. One of the Digital Foundry guys is like, the leaked information is very exciting. I've seen some other stuff that hasn't been leaked that's even more exciting. So this, seems to be like Sony's really going all in on this hardware, which the only thing I'm thinking is like, man, this thing will probably be expensive, which, I mean, so was the last PlayStation VR. It launched at $500, but
no, 300. It launched at 300, didn't it?
Well, the bundle to get the whole kit was 500.
Right. Okay,
right, yeah. So it's exciting though. I love the idea of the OLED screen. That's very important because the Quest does not have the OLED screen, so basically you don't get a true blacks basically it gets like a very, very dark gray, but you can't have a full blackout moment. So it's cool. The interesting thing for me about this event where they're seeking out AAA like projects, that's cool and good. I'm glad to see them search out talent for that. But at the same time, Sony, you got to put your money where your mouth is. Get some of your main teams to make full VR games. They did some of that last with PSVR, but I want to see them take it further. And I think that that's most likely one of the next big projects from Insomniac will be a PlayStation VR 2 game or whatever it's called. That just makes sense with their pedigree with Oculus already. So either way, very exciting. This also comes at a time where I saw that there's rumors that Valve is kind of slowing down on VR because they think that it's kind of dying out. So I don't know, man. VR is always up and down in this industry. Like Oculus Quest, as far as I know, is still doing very well, but definitely a different type of device aimed at a different type of person. So to see Sony go after high end with the PSVR 2 and PS5 will be good. I hope it works out for them just because I love VR.
Chris, I have to say, I agree with a lot of what Dustin says. It's going to be an expensive unit, I think. It was very controversial that PSVR cost the same amount as PS4 when it came out, and I would expect that this will cost the same as PS5 when it comes out. So I think $500 seems fairly reasonable. However, well, not reasonable, I guess that's up to you, but that seems like a safe bet. However, it sounds like I'm not much of a tech guy, as you guys know, but it sounds incredibly sophisticated, including with eye tracking and foveated rendering, a much better field of view. And I'm really excited about these controllers. Like the capacitive touch on them apparently can be done on multiple parts on each hand. So they're going to be able to do them, and it's cameraless. So
yeah,
I'm kind of excited about it, and I really hope that it fulfills some sort of promise. But they did say something interesting, and I don't know if you guys saw this, that it probably won't be backwards compatible with games. With games, obviously, it's not going to work on PS4. But they were saying that changes are adequate enough where it might not work. So, what do you think about all that, Chris?
I mean, this is super exciting. Like, I think I'm with you where like the controllers to me are the most interesting thing. I mean, like, yeah, granted, like, nice resolution, nice field of view, the OLED screen, these are all important. OLED, especially for VR, makes like a ton of sense because like when there's no light coming into your headset to kind of like glare on the screen, OLED really pops. Like these are all great. There's nothing bad about this, but touch capacitive controllers with like, it reminds me of like the Valve Index and how like sophisticated that piece of technology is. I don't think we're going to get anything like necessarily on that par, but I think we're going to get closer than any other controller is going to allow. So that in and of itself is very exciting. I do think they need to. Well, I do think they do need to get their teams on board with making things. Obviously, Insomniac is poised to do that very well. They're very experienced with VR. I think a really smart thing to do, and this is probably selfish of me, you gotta go for the weird experimental. Like I think you gotta go for like get Boneworks on there. Get if you can somehow swing it, Half-Life Alyx, like whatever money you need to put forward to do that, because that's the kind of stuff that shows what the capability of it is, and that's the kind of thing that sells people on it. Beat Saber is all well and good. Beat Saber is awesome, but we look at the highest downloaded PSVR games all the time, and it's always Beat Saber. And it would be nice to see something like, oh wow, Boneworks, ooh, oh, Half-Life on PlayStation. What's going on here? I think they need just more variety on that front, because if they go into this again with the same, like, you know what I mean, like the same 10 games, and it's selling the same exact 10 games for the entirety of its lifespan, that's not good.
Right.
You
got to imagine Valve, we talk about squeezing, or as I like to say, milking the orange, that they have milked the Half-Life Alyx orange far enough, and that Sony comes knocking with however many $1 million, that they'll be like, why not? Why not make some more money? Is Half-Life Alyx selling index units still? I don't know.
Probably not.
Well, I also feel like maybe there's an angle where Sony's been selling games on Steam, and they're like, come sell some shit on our platform. We've had a relationship in the past. Could be a little complicated because they own a little piece of Epic and Epic Game Store and all that, but Valve is just so libertarian in the way it's run that I don't think they give a flying fuck. I really just think that they want money. So I agree with you, Chris. I think they need to get some of these big games. The pricing will be a little prohibitive, I think, but so too was the pricing of PSVR. I think you're just going to get in or not based on, I don't think it's going to necessarily draw more people in, but I do think that there's more promise to be had with VR. And I feel like, although they have some expertise in Insomniac, like you said, they even have some expertise with VR at Gorilla, because remember, Gorilla Cambridge, which is closed now, they made rigs. So, and that was in Decima. So Decima works, by the way, in PlayStation VR. But I think what they might need to do is go and find a studio similar to Nix's that deals with PSVR, or I'm sorry, with VR and maybe VR porting or something like that, and just say, like, let our teams worry about making the game, and then we'll kind of present this stuff to you in such a way that, do you see anything here, Company X, that you think would make sense on VR? You are responsible for bringing it to VR. We don't have to straddle Capcom with making Resident Evil 9 a PSVR game. That's a waste of everyone's time. Instead, we'll make sure it functions based on all this. I don't think they have to make some games that are just for VR, but I think bringing games over, even in just some sort of sophisticated theater mode, will be very wise. And we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. I think there's a lot of problems to overcome with locomotion and all of that, but these new controllers are quite tantalizing. So, All right. Julian, I had a question from you, Julian Zhu, about this, but we already talked about your thing. So let's go on to number 5. The Embracer Group continues to purchase studios at a rapid clip. The company revealed the acquisition of 8 more teams, mostly in Europe, for a combined $313 million, with another $232 million available to the combined teams for reaching milestones within the next 8 years. So these aren't major acquisitions or pricey ones by comparison to what else is happening in the industry, but it fits in line with Embracer's MO. The move brings Embracer's cumulative headcount to more than 8,000 people, and here are the teams that have joined the family. 3D Realms, Crazy Labs, DigiX Art, Easy Trigger, Force Field, Ghost Ship Games, Grim Frost, and Slipgate Ironworks. These companies are being distributed to different Embracer holding groups. Force Field is going to Vertigo, DigiX Art to Koch Media, Ghost Ship Games to the Coffee Stain Imprint, and so on. And these 8 teams bring the total team count under Embracer and its various pieces like THQ Nordic, Saber Interactive, etc. to 64. So 64 teams. 3D Realms is probably the more storied team in this group, with a heritage going back to the mid-'80s, and with Duke Nukem owned by the team, and now owned by Embracer. Danish teams, actually, I don't know if that's true. I think Gearbox might own Duke Nukem now. Danish team Slipgate Ironworks also has an expansive catalog of both original games and ports across PlayStation 4's lifetime, while Ghost Ship Games' first title, Deep Rock Galactic, has yet to come to PS4. James Walker wrote into us on Patreon and says, greetings, gents. So, Embracer is at it again, snatching up even more developers, and this time a pretty significant one. 3D Realms being the biggest has me wondering, do they snag these developers for their cash, or cachet, or to preserve gaming history? 3D Realms has 6 projects in the works, but considering Duke Nukem Forever, I'm not sure that anything they could be working on would look promising enough to outshine that failure. I understand when they purchase IP, but it feels as though whoever makes these acquisition decisions is still upset that a claim no longer exists, and they want to prevent any developers with an iota of history to their name from suffering the same fate. Jokes aside, do you think these are good purchases for the group? Thank you all for the great content, and please keep fornicating that tasty fowl. We will, James. Thank you. Dustin, 8 more teams join. No one's super notable. 3D Realms is really a shadow of its former self. And again, I wrote it in here, but I'm pretty sure they don't even own Duke Nukem anymore. So I'm not even sure that that license comes with them. But there are some, like Slipgate Ironworks is a fairly substantial studio, but this isn't anything crazy. And I do have to James's point, I struggle to see the strategy at this point. It's just becoming worse and worse and weirder and weirder. And it's not like they're aiming higher and higher. They're just aiming at the same old teams. Like, they're not making any moves where it's like, we got NetherRealm or something like that. It's always something kind of not subpar, but small. And I don't know what their goal is. So what do you think, Dustin?
So yeah, the acquisition of 3D Realms is pretty interesting. They bring up Duke Nukem, which obviously that's a failure because that's a project they started. It's clear that they weren't the ones that finished it, but I don't think that they own that anymore. But more recently, some of the projects they've done have actually been pretty good, and they've kind of more changed into like helping other smaller developers. Like Ion Fury was a game that they recently did. Another one was Wrath, Aeon of Ruin, which is a game that I played some of, which they published that actually for a developer called Kill Pixel. And then, of course, Ghost Runner, which is a fantastic game. They worked on that with Slipgate Ironworks, who also now is owned by Embracer. So again, you're right that the strategy is weird in that they're like a wide spread of smaller teams that make smallerish games that sell a smaller amount of copies, right? So that they have a bunch of those, and it equates to having like one big team or something, or a few big teams, whatever. So just we always wonder when they're going to slow down, and they never do, and they continue to buy not just teams but batches of teams together. So you got to wonder when eventually that's going to start paying off, or when it gets too bloated and then there's too much to manage, even amongst these subgroups that they've created.
I found our conversation about consolidation a week or two ago fascinating on the show, because we were talking about Sean Layden's concerns about consolidation and how it's the enemy of creativity. I think that's where my concern is with this, Chris, because it was funny for a while to watch THQ Nordic just kind of bundle all these studios up, but it's taking like nascent talent off the market before it can really mature. And I don't really know to what end. It kind of just, from a creative standpoint, it kind of sucks. I hope they make lots of money and it all works out. They have some sort of strategy or plan. You can go read about the strategy and plan. They talk about what they're indicate, like in their press release, what they want to do. But I don't know. I just feel like it's a little ill-conceived. I don't understand how you can control this many creative entities at once.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I think whatever plan they have is one that's I'm sure they probably thought about it a lot, but I don't know if they've necessarily thought it through, because this is just so much. Like, even we talk a lot about, like, even just the Bethesda acquisition on Microsoft's front, and how that's a decent amount of studios even for Microsoft to run, and Microsoft is one of the biggest companies in the world, and they don't even have as many studios, as Embracer now has. So, like, how do you manage that? And, like, if you're not managing it, and if you're just sort of like doing this kind of hands-off kind of deal where it's like, hey, we bought you, but like keep doing whatever, then like what's even the, like what's the incentive? Like what, like are you trying to fold things into each other? Are you trying to like I just don't understand what the reasoning is. 3D Realms, like, by the way, Ion Fury bothers me so much because it used to be called Ion Maiden, and I thought that name was awesome.
Dude,
but
they got sued by Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that's
I know,
that's
it's
tempting,
so lame.
That's tempting fate.
So
it is cool.
But
also, wait, real quick.
yeah,
Also, Iron Maiden that's annoying because an Iron Maiden is a thing. It's not like Iron Maiden, the band, didn't make that up. Anyway, so go on.
It is frustrating. It bothers me to this day. But this honestly, like this group of, I guess not every single one of them, but this is like the most interesting group of developers to buy to me, in my opinion, because like 3D Realms is like obviously storied. They're obviously like they worked on Ghost Runner. They did like a bunch of like they're working on Graven, I think, right now or something.
I'm watching the trailer for that right now because I had not heard of it. It's interesting.
Graven's kind of weird. It looks kind of neat, but like still kind of like budget a little bit.
Yeah.
But and Ghost Ship with Deep Rock Galactic. I've heard a lot of people talk about how great Deep Rock Galactic is. Like, so this is actually like, it's not a bad. It's not like I wouldn't describe this as like a bad investment necessarily, but at the same time, it's just like, how do you manage all these? Like, do you fold them into one another? Are you like?
Yeah, they each are going to like a different holding company within them. Like,
it's so weird.
Like THQ is one of those, and Deep Silver I think is one, and Saber. So yeah, it is. Yeah. It is interesting. I just think I was thinking about it from this point of view that they're in a situation now where they can basically have a game a month as a publisher, and that would be, I think, conservative. You might be looking at a game every 3 weeks with 56 teams. If you multiply 56 times 3, you basically get 3 years and change. So it's not unbelievable to think like every 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, once they're rolling, they should have a new game. And that might be their goal. I mean, clearly that probably is the goal. And that will create a huge back catalog of constant small sales that do chip damage too. So,
yeah.
Chris,
flood the market.
I'm glad you brought up Deep Rock Galactic. I meant when I was looking at the notes earlier, I saw that game is way bigger. I knew it was big because I've always seen it on the top of Steam sales charts, but apparently it's sold over 2 million copies. Like, that's way bigger than I thought. Is it? That game is only on PC and Xbox, right? It's not on PlayStation. On PlayStation. Yeah. So pretty good.
All right. Let's move on to number 6. Last week, we reported on the incredible statistic that Sony had reached 10 million PlayStation 5 consoles sold. Especially impressive considering the economic environment, COVID, and especially problems with both manufacturing and shipping. Well, that number hasn't changed very much. It sits at 10.1 million now, if you're curious. But Sony has good news for those who haven't gotten their console yet. They've secured the materials necessary to reach their incredibly bullish goal of selling 14.8 million PlayStation 5s during its fiscal year. As reported by website Video Game Chronicle, Sony CFO Hiroki Totoki noted in part, quote, "For PS5, the target has been set for the number of units to be sold this year, and we have secured the number of chips that is necessary to achieve that. Regarding the supply of semiconductors, we are not concerned," end quote. As the website notes, Totoki said back in April that Sony was concerned they wouldn't be able to reach their goal number, though that is no longer the case. It's important to note that Sony's fiscal year runs from April through March, and it's also important to note that selling through 14.8 million more PS5s during that time period would bring life-to-date sales to 22.6 million units, which would be more than Nintendo's GameCube sold in its entire lifetime, and just south of Microsoft's original Xbox console. Sony would have achieved those numbers in about 16 months. Such ambitious numbers were revealed on the back of some other great data for the Japanese mega corporation. Sony revealed that PlayStation 4, first launched in 2013, has surpassed 116.4 million units sold, while Sony sold 10.5 million first and second party games during the last fiscal quarter, with 63.6 million pieces of software sold in total. So let's delve into this. I want to start with Sergio Pina, who wrote in and said, "Hey guys, according to the last earnings call, PS4 sits at just over 116.4 million units sold, selling 500,000 in its last quarter from April 1st to June 30th. And that's where we get the number from. I know there is much less incentive to get a PS4 since PS5 is around compared to still wanting to buy PS3 after PS4 was released. But did you guys expect the wall to be hit that hard and the drop off in sales to come so fast? Anything short of a price drop to say $150 or so, I don't see PS4 getting close to PS2 now. where before I wasn't so sure, wondering how you guys felt. They need to sell another 35 plus million units to get the PS2, and I just don't think that's going to happen regardless of the price. I mean, maybe they can get that happen if you get $100 PS4 in the wild, but Chris, what are you thinking about these, not only these PlayStation 4 figures, but you can also speak on, if you'd like, the Sony's now confidence that they've secured chips and they can make as many PS5s as they need to, or not need to, but that their goal, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's good, And this is such a unique moment in history where just like they just can't make the console. So like anytime you get news where it's like, hey, yeah, we can figure this out at least for the next like however many months and just get these machines out in the wild to all the people who haven't gotten them yet. I think it's, this is good news. I think like the PS4 is going to hit PS2? No. I don't think that's going to happen. Like that is inconceivable to me at this point. But I mean, 116 million units is that's insane. Like that is not like a failure by any means.
That's the second best selling PlayStation console.
Yeah. But I mean, 500,000, I don't know, 500,000 units in 3 months. I mean, given the fact that PS5 exists, like, I don't know if that doesn't strike me as like surprising or like particularly interesting in any real way. Like, I know that like people are like, oh, PS4 is more, I guess available than PS5, but I guess if you're like looking into getting a video game system now, I feel like a lot of people would probably just rather wait.
Yeah, definitely.
Like these machines are, these machines were dated when they came out, like I feel like people are going to want to get the new thing that everybody, especially with such a lack of, or such a push from Sony for like all these like first party games to the point where they're announcing, Horizon and God of War before they're even clearly ready and then pushing them into the next year. Like people are under the impression that the PS5 has more than it does. So I think in general, people are just going to want to stick with the new stuff. And that's just bound to happen. Like there was no way that this thing was going to sell 150 million units after the PS5, like get to 150 million units. I mean, after the PS5 came out, like no way.
What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, a PS4 is a bad investment, especially new at this point. Like, why would you put that kind of money into a console that is at the end of life? And if you are buying a PS4 now, then you're most likely the type of person that's buying one used for like, I don't know, $100, $125. And so that's not going to contribute to the count. But
yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think they'll hit that next goal, or not goal, but that next ranking. But I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah,
so,
they don't need to.
Right. The fact that they were able to secure more chips is awesome, and I'm wondering how this relates to the industry, the semiconductor industry at large. Are we seeing things start to return back to normal? Or was Sony really able to grease some palms, maybe do some backdoor shady deals and get some of these chips while other manufacturers are still struggling? So all I'm saying is if you buy a PS5, it's a possibility that chip could have gone into a pacemaker or something. And so buying one of those, you're basically killing someone.
It's all competition on the market.
Right.
Because for me, I thought it was kind of like a big dick move to say, yeah, we got it. We figured it out.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, when we have him on, and again, people will see this shortly because it's already been recorded, but from Moore's Law is Dead, he goes into the hardware implications of everything and why things are getting complicated and the different nanometer chips and the wafers and locations. We get into Taiwan a great deal and the imminent danger that those factories are under. And so there's so much fascinating. I just wish I kind of understood more what goes like a fly on the wall kind of situation. Where it's like, damn, dude. Because these companies have, Tom knows so much more about this than I do, but he was saying there's only like basically 4 players in manufacture with this stuff. And you have to kind of use your big boy leverage to like get what you want when everyone is going after the same amount of stuff. And we also discuss how like the margins are actually higher for them to make worse stuff. So they don't even prioritize any of the higher end stuff, including the custom chipsets that they make. And one of the questions we actually get into is if Sony or Microsoft or both or Nintendo could create their own system, their own internal isolated system that didn't rely on anyone else from R&D all the way to the consumer, which is what Apple has done. And so we get into all of that anyway. It'll be fascinating to think about. And in the meantime, I'm pleased to hear this just because this should, I hope, satiate that pent up demand at 22.6 million PS5s. If there is still a demand that is unmet, Sony has a massive success on their hands that they'll probably piss and shit themselves simultaneously if that happens. So,
yeah,
not to be so vulgar, but it's not all good news. Number 7, there's a number in PlayStation's recent financials that isn't so hot, however. PlayStation Plus subscribers and data relayed by website Video Games Chronicle, the numbers are clear. PS Plus has shed 1.3 million paying subscribers quarter over quarter. While this number still remains up year over year, 45 million to 46.3 million, PS Plus actually topped out at 47.6 million, and in fact, seems to have stalled out around that number, only rising from 47.4 million the previous quarter. Maybe even more ominous is that there are fewer active users on PlayStation Network overall, with monthly users down to 104 million from a pandemic high of 114 million, and a drop from 5 million compared to last quarter. Plus, which launched as an optional service on PS3 in 2010, has since become central to the PSN and works across PS3, PS4, PS5, and Vita. The core of the service is its enabling of online play, though that wasn't part of the service until PlayStation 4 brought parity to Xbox Live's rival Gold service. Subscribers also get free games each month, special deals, perks, access, cloud saving, and more. Captain Canada wrote it and said, "Look, Fat, I've heard folks this week freaking out about PlayStation Plus subscriptions seeing their first ever major drop, Q4 to Q1. Is this cause for major concern? I was thinking this could be because of the new lockdown subscribers from last year not renewing, especially since Q1 2021 subs are still 1.3 million higher than Q1 2020 was. Thanks. Knowing is half the battle." Thank you, Captain Canada. Ironic name considering the all-American G.I. Joe quote you just used, but I'll allow that. Now, this is a good point. If you read the recent financials from Square Enix, which I did, Electronic Arts, Square Enix, Bandai Namco, etc., they're all, even Take-Two with those meteoric Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead numbers, right? They're all saying our numbers are down. And this was bound to happen, right, Chris? I mean, people are going back to work. Also, you're getting some casual people in that are probably never going to play again. They were bored. There's just a lot. A PS Plus subscription is a luxury that I would actually say is even higher of a luxury than Netflix or Hulu or something, because you already have to have the hardware buy-in and the game and all the rest, and then you have to have the PS Plus subscription. So it's not a surprise when people look at their statement, their credit statement, they're like, I don't need this fucking thing anymore. And so are you concerned about these numbers?
No, not really. I think this is just how this is just how these things work. You know, I think subscription competition is like the main competition in this space now. And you know, not even in just games, but just in media consumption. Like I think about, like, even recently, you know, Hulu took Seinfeld off, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm just not gonna, like, what's on Hulu then? Like, really?
Right.
Like, why do I even have this?
Handmaid's
So I
Tale.
can't, because, like, yeah, so I canceled it though. So I was like, fuck it. I don't care. Like, whatever. So every now and again, you just get to a point where it's like, I don't think I'm going to renew it, because whatever. And, you know, your average person probably only has the, you know, the bandwidth and, like, the money for, like, a handful of these. So they're going to pick and choose, and they're going to trim the fat sometimes when, you know, when things don't necessarily appeal to them anymore. And I think a lot of casual people got on board during the pandemic and are now just, like, kind of like siphoning out. But even beyond that, I think there's just pretty strong competition in games subscription space right now with Game Pass and others. So that, like, it would make sense that it would be down, even with, you know, just given the fact that it's down everywhere. Like, it just makes sense.
I agree.
So
And I think Captain Canada made a really astute observation too, which is that quarter over quarter they're down, but Q1 over Q1 they're up. In other words, if you go back to data from before COVID, they are at a higher number now than they were then. So they have definitely grown, but it's going to be one of those blips that very happy to have fallen into. I mean,
Yeah.
if you read Sony's financials, they're fucking flush. They have so much money right now, and they talk about they're going to aggressively reinvest in PlayStation and studio, maybe some studio acquisitions and all the rest. So I think this causes a lot of reason for us to be excited. But Dustin, what do you think about the optics of PS Plus falling for the first time? I think that was the bigger thing, but I think it's important to just keep that fall in the context in when thinking about COVID, and also the year-over-year barometer as opposed to the quarter-over-quarter barometer.
Right. Context is everything. I just quickly did a Google search. We talked recently, though, about Netflix lost almost 500,000, which some of that may be beyond just the pandemic, but it's also Hulu lost 100,000 subscribers. So it just comes down to the fact that during lockdown, there was a demand for content at home. And like Chris said, there was a rise in new people checking out gaming. And so now we're seeing people, especially this summer, go back to some form of normalcy. And they're looking at this like, I don't need this anymore. But like you said, Colin, the overall, if you keep the context of pre-pandemic and now this beginning, we'll lightly call it post-pandemic, just because I know that.
Yeah, you never know with the Lambda variant.
Right. So we're seeing, these drops everywhere. So it just makes sense. Overall, though, if I was Sony, I would be happy about the overall growth.
I feel like I really try to be more cognizant of this recently. We do pretty well, and you can just, it's not really a big deal to have like 10 subscriptions going at the same time. You're not really going to notice it. But I still refuse to do that. I still like go in just because just because I can doesn't mean I'm going to. Like I remember like some time ago, I got rid of Showtime finally, but then it doesn't always work out because I got rid of HBO a few months ago, and now I need to watch Generation Kill for Knockback, and I'm like, fuck. So I need to go back, but I need to cancel Apple Plus. Like I probably could cancel Hulu. I think it's very similar to how I used to feel about why I wanted cable and why I still have cable TV. Is because I'm like, it just makes me feel comfortable. I never use it. I never watch TV. I never watch TV unless there's a sporting event on or like some catastrophic news event. But just knowing it's there puts my mind at ease. And I feel like with these various things, it's like, but it does come at a cost. And I think I've been made fun of by people in my own life. And I think people out there, you'd be surprised if you cut out like a couple of your subscriptions and then just multiply that by a year, you've saved like, an appreciable amount of money. So something to keep in mind, but I'm not too worried about it either. Just something that I wanted to report because we like to keep things on the up and up. And obviously we'll be tracking this moving forward, and also the cumulative kind of value in PlayStation Plus and what they'll do with that moving forward as well. Number 8, while the situation at Activision-Blizzard is very much in flux with lots of moving parts, there's one important update that we can focus on with clarity. J. Allen Brack is no longer the leader of the storied studio. Word comes by way of the official Blizzard blog, which briefly announced his departure. Brack was promoted to the president of Blizzard back in 2018 when the team's co-founder, Mike Moraim, departed from his role after 27 years at the company. Brack was best known as a production director and executive producer on World of Warcraft, and his time at the top of Blizzard has largely been seen as a disappointment. In fact, there were no core games released by Blizzard during his tenure, with titles like Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 still in the hopper. Taking over for Brack will be a duo ruling the studio as a co-presidency. Mike Ybarra, well known for his tenure at Xbox, will join Jen O'Neill at the top. O'Neill was previously the studio head of the Activision-owned team Vicarious Visions, and you may recall that the team was essentially given to Blizzard following the release of 2020's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake. Before that, Jen was a longtime Activision producer. Ybarra, on the other hand, joined Blizzard in 2019 and was previously head of Xbox's second-party initiatives, again during a fairly dark time in that sphere, though he does have his name on games like Sunset Overdrive and a few others. So, I want to reiterate that I have not much more to say about the situation outside of the episodes I've done with Rick Hogue, because I feel like that's the most responsible way and most useful way that we can contribute to this conversation. But I want to again open the floor for whatever they need to say to both Dustin and Chris. And Chris, I'll start with you. Do you have anything to add? Any thoughts on this situation, or are you all set talking about this for now?
I feel like I'm all set, man. Like they got rid of the guy, so like, I mean, that's probably a good thing. It wasn't did was Jalen Brack in charge when they did the whole like that Diablo phone game, and he was like, "Don't you guys have phones?"
Yeah, I remember. I think that was
Oh.
him. Yeah, I think that was him. Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah, well, it's probably a good thing. Nothing of value was lost. What does it say?
Yeah, I was looking at their releases, and I'm like, wow, the last major game they released really was Overwatch.
Yeah.
So
in like 2015,
yeah, 2015,
something like that,
2016, something like that. So he wasn't even in charge then. He was still working on World of Warcraft all the way through, I think, until he was brought into this position in 2018. So, Dustin, do you have anything that you want to add?
Is it normal in the games industry to have co-presidents? Can you think of any other companies that do that?
Naughty Dog did it. That's the
Really?
only other one. Yeah, that's when Christoph Balestra and Evan Wells were co-presidents, and I actually think maybe Evan Wells and Neil Druckmann are now co-presidents. But that's the
Interesting.
only studio that came to mind for me. I would have to look.
That just seems, I don't know. I always think of like having a co-president, two people in charge doesn't seem like a good idea to me, just because then if you have a fundamental disagreement between those two people, then that's can be troublesome. You know, I feel like most companies probably would do better having one person at the top, but I mean, other companies seemingly have made it work. But I'm wondering if this is just an optics thing as well. That's like we've got someone completely new and someone who is not a man also as one of the presidents. So that comes off as a lot better optically for a lot of reasons. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know these two people very well. Maybe they are the very best people to steer this ship. I have no. I feel bad for them. You know, this is going to be a very, very hard time for Blizzard, and they have a very difficult job ahead.
Yeah, I would agree. And we'll see where it all goes, but we'll leave the general conversation to those Sacred Symbols Plus episodes. And again, those are available to all. So go check those out if you want. But we, of course, appreciate your support on Patreon. Those are the people that make this all possible. Number 9, the announcement that Konami's long-running soccer series Pro Evolution Soccer would segue to a free-to-play model has been one of the more surprisingly controversial pieces of industry news in recent months. And it's doubtful the hullabaloo will stop after more recent news. PES, which is now known as eFootball, is launching in what is being described by Konami itself as quote-unquote basically a demo. In an extensive Q&A posted to eFootball's social media feeds, Konami is releasing the game in demo mode because, quote, they want people to get hands-on with eFootball as soon as possible, so we will launch with a limited number of teams and modes, end quote. Interestingly, however, everything will be free to play at launch. You won't even have the opportunity to spend money if you don't want to. But bad news still persists for console players, including those on PlayStation 4. eFootball is a mobile console crossplay game, and while it's developed first for consoles, it can be played across platforms. However, filters will allow you to barrier yourself away by not only console, but geography too. eFootball, which launches this fall, is the first free-to-play offering in Konami's winning 11/Pro Evolution Soccer franchise, which began back on the Super Famicom in the mid-90s, and which is the only true alternative to EA Sports' annualized, heavily licensed FIFA powerhouse, the best-selling sports video game on Earth. I don't know if you guys have much more to say on this, but I have noticed and gotten feedback, Peep, this is a really controversial issue. Have you seen any of that, Dustin?
Yeah, I saw people that rightfully, when we talked about this last time, they were like, guys, they're just making the mobile version for console, and it's no longer the same, will be up to the same quality. But I mean, this is a little conflicting to some of that feedback because they say here that they're designing it for a console and then downscaling it to mobile. But either way, when you're operating on the same development where you're focusing on both PlayStation 5 and iPhone, there's going to have to be compromises in order to make it work with crossplay. So they're making some of the right moves, though, you know, allowing people to choose who they play with, whether they want to lock off mobile players or whatever. That's cool. But again, with FIFA being so dominant in the field, they had to change something up, do something different. But I'm wondering what the numbers were for PES versus FIFA. Like how much more dominant was FIFA?
God.
Oh, it must be way more.
Yeah, I would say
right.
Probably 10-1 or something.
Yeah. So, you know, offering a free option, I think this is good. Allow more options in the price range for different people, whether price range is free or $60, $70, whatever. But it sucks for, I guess, the long-term fans of this specific version. But
yeah,
what are you going to do?
Also, Konami's just like, I don't know how out of practice they are, but like they're really bad at this at coming back into games. Like just like, oh hey, yeah, we're putting it out. It's basically a demo. Words that like I think everybody loves to hear. Like, can you imagine? If like Destiny 2 launched and like Bungie was like, yeah, so we're putting the game out. It's basically a demo, you know, like, but you know, it's fun.
Yeah, it's
you'd look at them like, what? Like, what is that? That is such a terrible, like, those words should never be in promotional material. Basically a demo. Amazing.
Yeah, I see it as it's pretty interesting because it's funny that it's almost quaint the way they're talking about it.
Yeah.
And you can't really be mad at them for saying like, well, you can't even spend money if you want to. So like, let's figure it out. We'll figure it out. I'm kind of rooting for them. FIFA's domination comes from a fine game. People love FIFA, obviously, but it's the same reason Madden dominated for so long. They just have a vacuum of licenses, players, teams, logos, history, stadiums. It's hard to compete with that. And I'm always rooting for the little guy to compete in that space.
Yeah.
Even if it's Konami.
They're also synonymous with the sport as well.
Right.
Like Madden means football. FIFA to me means football. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Number 10. Sony has quietly revealed new games for its PlayStation Now streaming service, and yet again, the new games are quite strong. Indeed, a notable trend for Sony's beleaguered streaming offering. The biggest game of the new batch is no doubt the Platinum-developed and Square Enix-published action RPG Nier Automata, which first came to PlayStation 4 in 2017. PS Now subscribers will have free access until November 1st. Meanwhile, quirky and mega popular RPG Undertale will also be free. Undertale, which came to both PS4 and Vita in 2017, will be accompanied on the PlayStation Now roster by newcomer Ghost Runner, the fast-paced action game first launched on PlayStation 4 in 2020. PS Now, which has just north of 3 million subscribers, is about 10% as popular as rival Microsoft's Game Pass service, and was first launched way back in the early part of 2014. Dustin, I couldn't help but think about you here.
Right.
A good way for people to get their kicks with Nier. What do you think?
Yeah, so both Nier and Undertale are both in like my top 10 games of all time. So these are two, I mean, from the Dustin Furman recommendation. I love both of these games. And also, dude, Ghost Runner is awesome. I'm a little unsure about what it would be like to play on a controller, but that's just from my perspective. It's like such a game where I feel like I would have a really hard time with it on controller because it requires a lot of precision. It's a very difficult game, but people have played it and loved it. If that's where you primarily play FPS games, you'll probably be fine. But 3 extremely strong choices in this month's lineup.
Okay. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. All right. Number 11. Publisher Electronic Arts has revealed some new games coming to its long-running EA Play subscription service. Perhaps unsurprisingly, EA Play is receiving a trio of new titles in light of the publisher's acquisition of Codemasters. Thus, F1 2020, Dirt 5, and Grid are all now available for download for all EA Play subscribers. This fresh announcement comes on the back of positive financial news for the company. EA's revenues and profits are up, and the company actually overperformed expectations according to website GamesIndustry.biz. Indeed, the overperformance was due to the positive sales of a couple of unusual releases, Mass Effect's Legendary Edition and the popular co-op game It Takes Two. Indeed, the company's CEO, Andrew Wilson, noted in part that cumulative sales were, quote, well above our expectations, end quote, even without accounting for the immense performance of EA Sports titles like FIFA and Madden. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And then number 12 is a wrap-up. Website Gamatsu reports adventure game Murder Mystery Machine comes to PS4 on August 25th. Rail shooter compilation X Zeus, the complete collection, comes to PS4 later this summer. FPS Rico London comes to PS4 and PS5 on September 2nd. You should both check that game out if you want. It looks awesome. Chinese developed action RPG Wan Wan Sword 7 comes to PlayStation 4 at an unknown date this September. And party game A Gummy's Life comes to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 at an undetermined point later this year. Website Push Square reports cartoonish RPG Kataria Fables comes to both PS4 and PS5 on September 2nd. Goofy golf game Golf Club Wasteland comes to PS4 on September 3rd. Simulation game Port Royale 4 comes to PlayStation 5 on September 10th. Zombie shooter World War Z Aftermath comes to PS4 on September 21st. And and will come with a PS5 centric update. I'm sorry. Truck Driver Premium Edition comes to PlayStation 5 on September 30th. Pokemon-like game Monster Crown, which looks really cool as well, comes to PlayStation 4 on October 12th. Fairy Tale-inspired Witchwood comes to PS4 and PS5 sometime this fall. And eagerly anticipated Oxenfree sequel Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals comes to both PS4 and PS5 sometime next year. The official PlayStation blog reports exploration game A Short Hike comes to PS4 this fall. So-called reverse horror game Carrion comes to PS4 by the end of this year, and bullet hell game Sol Cresta is coming via Platinum Games to PlayStation at an unknown point in the future. And finally, the Evil Dead video game slated for release later this year has been delayed until February of 2022 to allow for polishing of the single-player campaign. And I'm going over to PlayStation blog as we speak because I just want to see. They're doing a bunch of indie spotlights over there. So there's going to be a bunch more games that you want to keep an eye on. But as of the time we're recording, we're all caught up. All right, guys, as we always do, let's end with 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience via Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. We couldn't do it without you. We thank you for your support. And we'll start with Jose, who has an interesting question. We somewhat touched on this, but not from this angle. He says, hey, guys, the new Call of Duty is about to come out. And with the recent news about Activision, what do you think is going through the minds at Sony right now? They have the advertising rights to Call of Duty. Does Sony lay low for now or go all in on Call of Duty ads for PlayStation? It's a great question. We were talking earlier about the status of Call of Duty, about if people will boycott the game, how it will sell, if it'll even be any good. I assume it'll come out, but it seems like it's beleaguered. This whole new layer now, Chris, of issues comes to the fore because we have to consider Sony's point of view. Do they want... This is a very valuable thing they paid for, and it benefits everyone, but I can't help but wonder if they'll be able to do Call of Duty. Like this probably puts a bigger wrench into these plans that were seemingly delayed because Call of Duty is not ready to show yet. And now this makes the problem even more catastrophic. What do you think?
Yeah, they're definitely in an uncomfortable situation. I was even curious as to whether or not Call of Duty would even launch this year at all, just because of I would imagine that, you know, maybe COVID was a problem. Maybe like just in general, you've seen a lot of delays, but we've not seen Call of Duty delayed ever. But I feel like, you know, given the staggered release of Call of Duty games, right, it stands to some reason that like the Call of Duty game that would come out now would theoretically be the one most impacted by the pandemic, as opposed to like the one previous, which was made mostly outside of it. And only like towards the tail end did it even have any effect on it. So that's even a question in my mind of like, is this even coming out this year? But they're in an uncomfortable situation for sure, because the optics game really can't do this well. You know, you either come out and throw a lot of money to Activision and like, hey, here's Call of Duty, come play it on PlayStation. And there's no doubt going to be a lot of articles, you know, about it. Or you can just not do that and miss out on a pretty lucrative deal and potentially damage, you know, a relationship with a pretty enormous publisher. So they're not in a good situation. I don't envy them.
No, I don't either. Dustin, what do you think about this Hobson's choice they're in? I think they have to just stay true to the deal. Not legally. I'm sure Activision probably wouldn't really. Maybe they would have a leg to stand on. I just don't think that it would optically be smart to trifle with Sony if they didn't want to go down that path. But I think Sony kind of maybe just needs to assume that most people don't know or care, and that it doesn't necessarily affect. It's kind of unfair to the game. It's kind of unfair to the team. The people that made the games are the victim. But it's the irony that the game's success most benefits the people at the top. So this is just the conundrum of unfortunately just rampant capitalism. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned people not knowing or not caring, and I think that most of people Call of Duty buyers will fit in the not knowing category, or you know, maybe they see it on the news or a headline somewhere, but they don't necessarily connect the dots. Like, Call of Duty is the best-selling game every year. Millions and millions of people there are a lot of people plugged in, like people that listen to this show and read IGN. But again, we've talked about this early in the show. Real life is not Twitter.
Yeah.
Sony may get some articles, like Chris said. They may get some flack on Twitter if they do this, but that's not the real life. This isn't their full audience. It's not their full player base of people buying and playing their games. So they are going to take a PR hit for doing it. But when it's all said and done, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but when it comes to the bottom line, the guys that are going to Walmart the week of the Call of Duty launch or Target, wherever, GameStop, they're not thinking about this.
Yeah. If like 15-year-old Call of Duty fans don't know who J. Allen Brack is, like they just don't.
Yeah.
Like, and that goes with anything, dude. Like the majority of, I guarantee you, probably like 90% plus. Like 90% of the people who own PlayStation hardware, they don't know who Herman Hulst is.
Sure, of course not. Totally not.
Right.
I didn't, like, for the longest time, even like when I was a kid, if I didn't have to know this information, I probably wouldn't either. Because what do I care? I don't give a shit. Who, like, it has no impact on me who runs what or what this person's name is or whatever the hell's going on. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't care about what the hell was going on with. I remember the thing that like even brought that consciousness to me was when EA shut down Pandemic and all these other studios. That was like, I was like a child and I was like, wait, what's happening? Why are they doing this? Why must you? And that everybody I think has that moment, right? At some point in time, if they're into the medium enough or if they're into the culture enough where they like kind of like start paying more attention or like something breaks through and it kind of pulls them in to learning more about how the industry works. But the overwhelming majority of people, they don't care. Like, and they're probably not going to care. The one thing that makes this a little bit different though is that I can see this kind of becoming a mainstream thing that kind of breaks through and being like a subject of conversation even outside of the industry itself, where it's like, Activision's pretty big. I think everybody knows how big Call of Duty is. So it's bound to be like, you're bound to see something about this on like Fox or like CNN at some point if it gets to the point where like, because dude, this story keeps getting, they put a bit of a damper on it with like with taking J. Allen Brack out, but it feels like the more you learn about this story, it gets like kind of worse. So I don't know if they can avoid that big breakout, then I guess they're probably in a pretty, not an enviable situation, but certainly a better situation than they otherwise would be. But still, being the guy at Sony making this call has got to suck.
Yeah,
because like if it backfires, then that guy's fucked. It's that guy. You're out. You're gonna be replaced with a guy like immediately under you who's probably gonna make like the same mistake in 15 years. It's like whatever.
Yeah, it's complex. I want. Where's your gut telling? What's your gut telling you, Dustin?
I think they're just gonna do it. I mean,
yeah, I think so too.
I think that at the end of the day, they are beholden to the stockholders and trying to make money. And they will make money on this Call of Duty game, whether Blizzard is in a bad light or not. So that's money tells all.
Trivia question: what's the last year that a Call of Duty game didn't come out? Do you know?
2004.
Yeah, that's right. 2004.
Well,
it's the last time there wasn't a Call of Duty.
I don't know why I know that.
That was the last time that Call of Duty came out in 2003. Call of Duty 2 in 2005, and ever since Call of Duty 2, every year there's been a Call of Duty game. And I must say, let's give Activision their props. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to say,
yeah.
but they have never missed. Now the quality has vacillated a little bit, but I think everyone agrees these are very AAA games, and they have never missed, and that is incredible. It's absolutely incredible, and got to give them their props for that. I guess their props.
Yeah.
All right. Nathan Favreau wrote into us and said, "Hey, CDC, in regards to your thoughts that Game Pass may end up on PlayStation, if that were to happen, what scenario would make that possible? I play out all the possible ways that can happen, and everything points at Sony's pride preventing it from ever happening." Now, it's just something I say. I don't know how the boys feel about it. I want to throw it over to them. I'll start with you, Dustin. I'm just curious, if you think this can happen, how do you see it happening? How does my theory come to fruition? Let's answer it in two ways. Do you agree with the theory? And if you do, how do you see it sprouting?
I do not agree with the theory because the only way I see it happening is that there are no negatives for Sony. Like it would have to be an extremely gimped version of it that only has Xbox first and second party games, stuff that's not available for sale in the PlayStation Store, because Sony makes an incredible amount of money, just like Valve or Microsoft or whoever. They make so much money from that 30% cut. So you introduce a subscription service that you're not the one that's making the money off of it. Why would you do that? You look at examples like the show. Well, maybe not the show. The show's not a good example just because that's their game. I mean, it still does apply, but let's like Outriders. Sony made a ton of money on Outriders, even though it was available on Game Pass, because there were so many people that only have a PlayStation and they wanted to play that game. So they bought it the old fashioned way. They purchased it for money. So
wow.
I just don't think there's any reality where Xbox would want to make that version of Game Pass. So I don't think it's happening.
All right. Yeah. Interesting. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's possible either. I just don't see Sony like being okay with it. This is the same company that doesn't let crossplay on their platform unless like they pay, like they're very stingy with the way that they cooperate with other entities, and it's very strict. They're very buttoned down. They're very much like, I just don't see a situation where like a subscription service from a competitor ends up on their platform in such a way that it is tantalizing to the consumer. Like I would like they would. I agree with Dustin. I think whatever Game Pass ends up on PlayStation would have to be something almost like, yeah, you could use this piece of shit if you want. You could play like Peggle or something, and like it's like the only game on PlayStation Game Pass is like Peggle 2 or something, and it's just so they can compare it, and you could be like, look at PlayStation Now, huh? Look at all this, look at all this, and look at Game Pass with Peggle.
Yeah, that's
and like I really do feel like it's like a situation with that. It's like that's the only situation where they would allow it, and I don't foresee that being something that Microsoft would want to do, especially when they're just kind of they're doing well already as is, and there's rumors of this streaming box now that they're working on.
Yeah, which would be interesting, and that's obviously the next. That would really take it directly to PS Now at this point, and why I feel like there's got to be, or not got to be, maybe something to this Netflix rumor, but we'll see. I'm surprised by your guys. I don't know, lack of imagination on this. I feel like.
Well, can you imagine? What's your scenario that this happens?
Well, I have to structure it by saying that I think, because I disagree with what Nathan says here, where he says Sony's pride prevents it from happening, or would, like, in all of the ways he games it out in his mind. I feel like Sony gets the ultimate pride boost by getting Game Pass. I think that, like, if they got a Game Pass that made sense for them, they'd be like, fuck yeah, we won. Like we have it on our system now. We get a cut of it. It's over. I feel like that would almost be like a game altering situation, which is why I think Microsoft would be the one, ironically, I think less interested in doing it the way I see it, which is a very boutique first and second party only version that costs like $20 a month. And I think Sony would be confident in it because they can say, like, yeah, you get Halo now, and you get Gears, and you get Forza, and our games are still better, and they're still on our console. I mean, because I think that, like, if you compare and contrast all of this stuff, their stuff is still better. This is what I keep saying about PlayStation Plus Collection and why I think it could be leveraged in an interesting way. But I think people want volume more. So it's not that I disagree with what you guys are saying. I just think I'm seeing it from the perspective of Sony looking at it as a massive win, and how, because you're right, Chris, they are very incalcitrant with working with other entities. There's no doubt, but it's different when you have a key to the fucking kingdom, basically, of one of your competitors. It's not like someone saying, I want crossplay on my fucking shooter. It's Microsoft saying, hey guys, do you want a tailor-made PlayStation 5 version of Game Pass? Because we can all win. And I think that's possible. I don't think it's going to happen like anytime soon. I think it's the mid 2020s or something like that. But
yeah,
I think that satiates the demand almost of every player, right? Because Microsoft gets Game Pass on the most popular gaming platform. Maybe it won't be at that time. And Sony dominates hardware. Now they can say, like, there's literally no reason for you to ever buy an Xbox. Why the fuck would you ever buy an Xbox? And that would draw people into the PlayStation network. So I don't know. I mean, it's obviously very complicated, but I have imagination here on this one, boys.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if there's no point in buying an Xbox, why would Microsoft do it?
Well, they're already. I would already argue that they are doing that. They already.
I don't necessarily. I don't think I necessarily agree. I think because the Game Pass offering on console is a lot more robust than it is on PC, and I think that's really the draw. Is that, like, the Game Pass on console is hilariously, like, huge compared to, like, because I've checked it out on both, like, console and PC, and, like, yeah, PC has, like, the main first party, but a lot of the third party stuff is, like, you see, like, this graph that they come out with every now and again where it's like, this is coming to Game Pass. And then, like, later on, like a couple months later, it's like, oh, this same game's coming to Game Pass again, but it's Game Pass PC. And it's like, they're not exactly the same as far as, like, the selection goes. And also just, I don't know. I think I know what you're saying in the sense that, like, oh, stuff's available on PC, so, like, why would you? Or, like, you know, that's valid. But I still think there are some benefits to the console that exist now that wouldn't if that was the case. It might not be, like, a massive purchasing decision. It might not be, like, a massive percentage of the reason why people buy Xboxes. I think it's mostly just because they're available and they, you know, people like consoles and, you know, whatever, they're already in the ecosystem or they're interested in trying stuff. But I don't know. I can't imagine Microsoft sinking money on this much hardware only to then toss the main reasons why that hardware is so tantalizing to the direct competitor, unless their direct competitor isn't PlayStation, which is, like, argued. You can argue that. Like, there's a bunch of articles saying, like, hey, you know, it's like Xbox is competing with Google and Amazon and all these other things now more than they are with PlayStation. That could be a potential future, but I don't know. Would I like to see Halo on PlayStation? Yeah, absolutely. But I just have a hard time imagining, like, how that pitch would be brought up.
It's the conundrum, I think, is the conundrum's interesting because Microsoft's kind of put themselves in this situation where being the first to do something like a subscription model at scale like they're doing means that it comes with certain sacrifices. And I think that they have to make a decision. I think they've already made the decision, which was my point, but they have to make a decision what's more important to them, subscribers or hardware. I don't think you can have it both ways ultimately, because it reminds me a lot of Netflix when they were getting into streaming. Like, in that mindset, the first thing they should have done is gone after, like, Roku and be like, we got to tie you up and get Netflix on Roku. But what they said was, like, we don't give a fuck what you run Netflix on. Like, we are a subscription service. And if Microsoft wants to embrace that, then I think it doesn't conflict with either company's end goal. And I think Sony would never want to sacrifice its hardware. I think Microsoft will be thrilled to sacrifice its hardware if it meant that they had 100 million subscribers. Yeah.
But then the interesting thing about this is, like, then we'll just have a console space that just has one console, basically, because the Switch isn't, the Switch is a portable, as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's not really, like, people, like, I play it on my TV and all that, but, like, I don't really even view it as, like, a console at this point. It's like, this is a Smash Brothers machine. And so we'll be entering this weird kind of ecosystem where it's just PlayStation then. And I don't know. I don't know if I feel comfortable with PlayStation feeling like they're on top and actually being on top to the point where they're, like, as, arrogant as they have been when they weren't even, like, that worries me. Like, the arrogance of these companies, if they can get to that point, worries me. So I would just, in general, err against it. But I see what you're saying. I see the reasoning behind it. But
I'll give you the last word on that, and we'll just see how it develops. I mean, we're not going to have anything more to say about it for a while. Zachary Abel wrote into us and said, boys, has the PS community lost their mind? It seems like the more fanboy PlayStation community collective has begun losing their minds worse and worse with every Microsoft success. Halo Infinite was the latest where the fanboy community lost their mind in the vein of unanimous praise for the first flight and beta. It was so bad that a Naughty Dog animator even felt compelled to call out the now infamous fruit physics in video in disdain. Colin has said it's getting weird out there, and I think he's absolutely right. Has anyone else noticed this? Thanks for all you do. I do think I'm right. Dustin, what do you think something's in the water right now? I feel like something's weird going on in the game, in like the games, in the fanboy space, and it's bleeding into how we do business in some way. Because like I got a Twitter message just from someone this morning randomly tweeting at me being like, because I tweeted out that comparison about NES, SNES, and N64 all being outsold by GTA 5. I just put those numbers together. Just thought it was interesting. Someone said to me, Nintendo really lives rent free in your head. And I'm like, yeah, they do. I've been a Nintendo fan since like the 80s. That definitely live rent free in my head. I wouldn't be in this chair right now without Nintendo's, no doubt about that. But it's just weird. Like you can't even make like what is a totally innocuous statement that is simply making comparisons for no other reason than NES, SNES, and N64 very neatly fit just under 150 million, if you're curious. That's how I came to that. But it does seem like everything's ratcheting up. And one of the conventional pieces of wisdom has long been that the fanboy wars are kind of dying, consoles are dying, first-party games are dying. And that's just not true. And I feel like it's worse than it's been since I don't think it's like 90s magazines bad where it was like comical, but I think it's early PS3 360 bad right now. Like when PS3 was just getting the shit kicked out of it and everyone was just feel like, I mean, I remember those days well. It was hysterical actually. But yeah, what do you think about all that?
Definitely affects us and the fact that we are a enthusiast podcast that's focused on PlayStation. And so we're going to draw in PlayStation fanboys just by the title of our show. But we do not operate in the way that they would like. We see this in the comments nearly every week, but not an overwhelming amount, but there's always some. And of course, Twitter is just that constantly. But I think it just comes at a time. It's so interesting, the dynamics where we're at, because Sony is clearly ahead this generation when it comes to sales. They're dominating, and we've talked about that being based on the inertia of the PS4. At the same time, the Xbox is making a huge comeback in that Game Pass is huge. We see Halo Infinite doing so well. And so these fanboys are really, I mean, I guess they just don't know how to act because the PlayStation fans still feel like they're winning. But at the same time, they might feel a little sensitive about the fact that Xbox is gaining ground. The Xbox fans have been hurt for so many years over Xbox One that they finally have some wins under their belt and they don't know how to handle themselves at the same time. So it's just like, and in addition, we're seeing the total tribalism of everything on the internet. Everything has become tribalistic. So it's not surprising that these fanboy wars are back in full swing. And you know, for some people it is fun, right? Like when I was on Iron Lords last week, some of those guys really do have fun with it, and I have no problem with that. You know, it's fun to take. We make swings every once in a while here that are like totally jokes because I mean, Colin, you have an Xbox in your house now, but like Chris and I both have Xbox Series X. I play a ton of games on PC and PS5, and surprisingly, more and more lately, I'm playing a lot of games on Series X, and I play. Dude,
That's okay.
My wall of amiibo speaks for itself when it comes to my feelings about Nintendo. But
yeah, our coordinator, Micah, my girlfriend, is an Xbox fangirl. I mean, she's a huge Xbox fan. And so that is why she's like on Xbox how I'm on PlayStation, where it seems unnatural not to play there. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. If you want to have fun with it, great. That's cool and all. There are some very, very toxic ones out there though. But I'm sure. I mean, Chris, you probably have a unique perspective on this, just because you are, our I feel like our show is really well balanced. Colin is the purist. I'm kind of really spread out, and Chris, you are, I wouldn't say more on the Xbox side, but you have a tendency to lean that direction. So I'm sure that some people have the fanboys have some choice words for you as well.
Yeah, there have been some qualms. Everybody's like, you're an Xbox fanboy. It's like, I just like Halo, dude. Like, it's and dude, how do you? I don't know. There's been so many great first party offerings from like all of these companies. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like all of these. Like, how do you not? What you're telling me? You're not charmed by Gears of War? You kidding? Like, come on. Like, you just didn't play it then, I guess. Or like, there's so many good things everywhere that like I just don't see the point in like sectioning myself off. Like, and I don't have this like I don't have the loyalty thing. I never did. Like, I started with the Nintendo Entertainment System was my first console ever. And I played the shit out of it. I played like Mario and like Shadow of the Ninja and like Excite Bike and all these like really old things. And then I moved immediately from that to the PS1, and I loved it. And then that to the Xbox. So like video games my entire life have always been just like, what's going on over here? What's going on over here? What's going on over here? And now I'm in a fortunate position where I can experience all of that at once. And it's awesome. It's fantastic. Super grateful. But I don't know. I think I first noticed this mentality, this fanboy mentality, I guess, like, I mean, aside from like the 360 PS3 generation where it was like pretty big and all over, every single comment thread was just that. Even on stuff like, dude, I saw PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 fights on like Beyonce's Halo music video. It was like insane. It was like there was no containment whatsoever. But I remember like the first inkling that I got that it was ramping up recently was when these PlayStation 5 or PS4 games came to PC and people were upset about it. And I couldn't understand that like at all, like as a base idea. Because like, what? It's not even like it's not even to the degree where I could see people on the Xbox side being like, day and date, what the hell is that? Like, I could see that being like some grievance, but like this 5-year-old game coming out on PC, I just don't get what you lose. Like, it's so strange to me. And then like the fact that it's persistent, like Dustin said, everything in general is like hyper divisive, just because I think extreme people just like tweet something and then they find other people who tweet the same thing, and then before you know it, there's like a community of like sociopaths, like who all like upvote each other and like support each other, and it's like the worst kind of like codependent.
It's a circle jerk is the nice way to put it.
Yeah. So it's I don't know, man. It's uncomfortable to me. I just like play what you want, man. Like and also just since this commenter brought up the this fruit physics thing, where there was like, I don't know if you saw it, Colin, that comparison of like Call of Duty and like in the Halo Infinite beta, where it's like in Call of Duty all the fruits explode, and it's like,
okay,
these are such vastly. It bothers me when people compare things because they look the same. Like because as an FPS guy, I know that Doom and Battlefield and Call of Duty and like Quake and like these are all, and Far Cry, these are all such massively different experiences that all just kind of get lumped in and compared to each other just because gun on screen, face outward. And it's like, I said this on Twitter where it's like, it reminds me of people who like compare like, oh, here Super Mario Brothers and Hollow Knight, and like they're side scrollers,
right?
Sure, but they're such vastly different games to the point where it's just like, I don't know, man. It's getting annoying.
It's like opening a book and just looking at the pages of the book and be like, well, these are both books. That's about as much as you can tell me about. Yeah.
Interesting.
Words? That's nuts. So my whole thing with this, something you said with me, Dustin, resonated with me, which is that I feel like PlayStation fans feel like they're losing again, but they're not. And so they don't know what to do. Like every time, because I could feel that, where it's like, it doesn't feel like we're winning, as PlayStation fans in quotes. And I took a real compliment again, Tom, from Moore's Law is dead. He gave our show a great compliment where he's like, it always makes me laugh when they call you guys fanboys, especially me, because no podcast, no PlayStation podcast, he's saying, but no podcast is harder on PlayStation than we are. And he's like, so that's always, he's like, that's really funny that they feel that way. But I look at it as, and I've expressed this in the past, I grew up with an NES and an SNES. We went back and got Genesis and all that stuff later on. And then I had an N64 and a PS1. And then I had money like in high school and in college. And so I had a GameCube, a PS2 and an Xbox, and I was playing on everything. And I found that to be like my least favorite generation. And I felt like I wasn't really getting my mind around everything that I wanted to. I felt like I needed to focus in, and it really speaks to my OCD. It's the reason why I like trophies and completions and 100% and my clock being really neat and all that. I mean, I know I'm a little crazy. So it's playing in one vertical it's not a fanboy thing for me. It's an investment thing for me. And like, I look at it more as like I'm a scholar and an historian and like a participant, and we'll see what happens. Maybe PlayStation dies and one day, and I'm like, well, that's the end of PlayStation, and that's the end of my PlayStation. You know, I was here for the whole ride, and that's the way it went. I think people need to segment, because some people talk to me like I am a PlayStation fanboy for encouragement. Like, oh, we need you, because some people, you know, call me that as an insult, which is fine, but also like, oh, what did you see this? What do you think of that? I'm like, someone tweeted to me about all this Halo stuff, like you're saying with the fruit and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I like this. I don't care if you like it out there. It's like, it's cool that you have your own preference. In fact, we're all like snowflakes, and we're all, not in an insult way, but in all very individualistic. And that's the way it's going to be. That's the way it's got to go. And some of us are snowflakes as well in the other way.
Also, this winning thing is very bizarre because, like, guys, these companies are raking in money. Like, all of these people are happy. Like, they're all winning at this point. You know, there's not a single one of these. Like, you could argue that, like, I think, like, in the beginning of the PS3 generation, Sony was losing. You could argue, like, the entire Xbox One generation, Xbox was losing. But, like, these are still like multi-billion-dollar companies that are raking in money every single second of every single day. So like, just calm down a little bit. Like, you don't gotta like wear the jersey. You know, you don't gotta like, oh man, I hope Naughty Dog really knocks it out of the park for my well-being. It's like, just calm down. Right. Just enjoy the stuff you like and tune out for the stuff you don't, and you'll be fine.
I agree. I sometimes try not to be too judgmental because I'm a big sports fan, and obviously there's some parallel there, because like the New York Jets, who I am obsessed with, they're a company. They're like one of the most valuable sports assets in the world. And I sit there and watch them lose every week, every year, every season, whatever. And I buy merch and I engage with their social media and I go to games and all of this. And so I'm like, well, what's so different about that from being a PlayStation 5 fan? But I think it's different just in the sense that we're in an interactive medium with a lot of choice. There are 32 NFL teams. If you want to watch like high-end football, you're going to choose one of these 32 teams and then become engaged with them, and they have history. But the game doesn't change, really. The idea doesn't change. The goal doesn't change. So it's a little different. So I don't know. I try not to be too judgy. I want people to really demarcate fandom from fanboyishness. And I think fandom's great. But remember that the word fan comes from fanatic or fanatical. That's where the word fan comes from. So I think we've also lost sight of the real meaning of the word too.
Yeah. The thing though too that like, and not to stay too heavily on this, but like just the idea of, because I'm a pretty big fan of certain things, you know, like I have bands that I love. I have like games that I know a lot about, that I pay attention to a lot. I'm a big Halo fan. But like the idea that you would never critique the thing because you like it is bizarre. Like I can't understand that. Like that's the one thing where it's like, because if I'm a fan of something, I ideally like I personally want to be as objective about it as possible. And if I'm going to criticize it, I want to be as constructive as possible and comprehensive as possible. And it breaks my brain when somebody's like, I'm a fan of PlayStation or I'm a fan of Xbox, and then nothing they've ever said is negative, you know? And it's just like, what? How do you How is that a person?
I totally agree.
Like, I just don't understand.
I totally
it.
agree.
It's alien.
Yeah, it's very strange. Because I love bands and stuff that put out bad albums, or in my opinion, bad albums. And it's like, you have to acknowledge those kinds of things. And I also, it's funny because in thinking about and framing this conversation around fanboyism, it just bears repeating that I think anything taken up to the line is fine, but crossing the line doesn't bring you any more joy or pleasure either.
Yeah.
Attaching your self-worth or in some way to these companies is strange. And I say that only because people do that with sports a lot too. And I've been there. I've been so depressed after a Jets loss. Like, I've been like, in a fetal position, basically. I'm like, everyone's like, why do you feel this way? Some things are beyond comprehension. I feel like we can comprehend this one a little bit better. And hopefully people stop being fucking nuts out there. That would be nice. And we can have real, tangible conversations about things that are good and things that are bad. And that's always been, you know what was a real learning experience to me as we close this question out is Star Wars Episode 1 came out when I was in 9th grade. And I was a huge, I still consider myself a Star Wars fan, but I was a fucking huge Star Wars fan. I was reading all the novels and playing all the games. And you see Episode 1, I remember seeing it May 19th, 1999, I believe it was. And you get out and I'm like, that was awesome. And we go out to eat and you're like, wow, you see this and this and this. And then you think about it. Like the fandom kind of, all the weird shit kind of comes out and you go see it again. And you're like, wait a minute. This sucks. And then there was this argument around the turn of the century where it's like, well, you're not a Star Wars fan then. But it's like, but no, I am a Star Wars fan. That's why this sucks. And so it becomes complex like that too. And I think that was a eye opener for me as a fan of something,
I had a moment like that with Spider-Man 3 when that was the first movie I walked out of the theater thinking like, I love Spider-Man. What happened? Like, what did they do?
It's a shame, but it happens.
It was a sobering moment. I think everybody needs that to happen at least once. Maybe it's possible that a lot of these people haven't had that moment yet.
That's true.
It's very possible.
Certainly.
Because like when that moment happens, that's the moment where it's like you've been yanked out of the Matrix and you're bald and covered in slime and you got a bunch of nasty USB ports hooked up to you and you're like, whoa, that was terrible. That was an awful Spider-Man movie. Why is that 70s show child Venom?
Whoa. All right.
Whoa.
Adam Karskadin wrote into us and said, hello, Charlie, Mac, and Dennis. Now, I'm interested in this because I don't know who's who, but I don't even want to venture a guess. There's been some fascinating conversations about industry consolidation as a result of extremely expensive games, particularly from Sean Layden. My idea is that the path to cheaper games lies with artificial intelligence. I'm sure you guys have seen the internet app that creates a fictional photorealistic face and converts a toddler's drawing into a realistic landscape. This tech could significantly reduce development costs if made readily available for devs for facial animation, environmental design, and more. What's your opinion on making game development cheaper with AI tools? I love this idea. Dustin, I'm curious what you think of this. This reminds me of this because I listen to a lot of like philosophy and tech and all these podcasts, conversations, people much smarter than I am. And there is this like argument that breaking chess and then later breaking Go, the game, like which a computer can basically reliably win constantly. Chess was a broken up thing and then Go was something broken later. That computers had somehow broken some sort of barrier in artificial intelligence because winning Go reliably requires some sort of even enhanced creativity and seeing the board in a certain way and all that and learning that even chess, which is my favorite game ever, doesn't necessarily require. And so it suggests that AI can do really amazing things. And he's right. We're seeing a lot of this, some scary ass shit as well. But what if a studio like CD Projekt, instead of, and this almost sucks because it removes people from it, but maybe just as an experiment, you don't need designers. Because what if you just said, like, here are the rules. We want Eastern European wooded topography and all that encapsulates. We're going to feed you with all of the necessary assets, the trees, the water, and all of the rest. You lay it out in a way that you think is most pleasing and most accurate to the time and place that we're trying to replicate. You almost don't even need a designer. You just need to give the computer time to work under those rules. I'm wondering if any of this speaks to you, because of course, one of the fascinating things about games is the human touch, and removing that could make games better, but could also depersonalize them.
Right. Well, we are starting to see some of this already happen with the new Unreal engine, Unreal 5, where they have that like crazy realistic character creator. And a lot of the stuff they've talked about is how they want to streamline things in order to make things easier to make, thus cutting down on budgets. And apparently it's supposed to be very promising. I'm wondering though, there's a difference between better tools and then using AI generated stuff. And I think that it does bring up a question of the human touch of things. And it's interesting to see how other industries have dealt with this. It made me instantly think of I looked it up just to get the specific details. So Pixar in 2006 released the movie Cars, and they lost the Oscar to the movie Happy Feet. And so in Pixar's next movie, in the credits, they put our quality assurance guarantee, 100% genuine animation, no motion capture or any other performance shortcuts were used in the production of this film. So Pixar had quite the chip on their shoulder, the fact that they lost because Happy Feet, they felt like cheated by using mocap. Obviously, this is totally different than AI, but it would be interesting if we start to see more and more games use AI and we start to see an elitism towards games that are like, this was 100% made with human animators, human programmers, whatever. But surely this is coming. We're already at the point where computers can write poetry that is indistinguishable.
Right.
Computers can write songs that are indistinguishable. So you have to imagine that this will be the way of the future, for better or for worse.
What do you think about this, Chris? About the possibilities of AI and all the rest? Like about it would be really. I would be interested as just a project for people to just make a simulation almost. With rules in which it's like, here's what it is. Make the role-playing game, write the dialogue, make the world, make the rules and the battles. And it would be interesting to see what a computer would come up with. And I feel like it would be a little eerie.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It'd be a fascinating experiment, but I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me, the idea of just like AI building games, and it doesn't sit well with me with AI, doing poetry or doing music either, because I don't know, like, I feel like if AI is required for art to be sustainable, then we've made a mistake. Like, because at some point the standard is just going to be unachievable by just people, and like, it just seems like a really eerie road to go down. It's one of the least exciting things about the future to me is the creativity of AI. Because at what point, like, I don't know, maybe you can have like an AI that makes something as interesting as like Ken Levine can make, right? But like, that sort of becomes not impressive at that point, doesn't it? Because you could just replicate that process over and over again, and then it loses what's special about it in the first place, which is the fact that, yeah, Ken Levine did this and no one else did, and people who try can't. And the second you take monumental achievement and turn it into an algorithm, it becomes standard. And then what hopes does a random person, if you want to make a game, then if an AI is making stuff that Ken Levine makes, like, you're fucked. If an AI is making The Last of Us Part 2, what are you going to do?
Well, this touches on the whole runaway AI thing anyway. The answer is you would do nothing and would probably become an impediment to them eventually. So
yeah.
it is just an interesting thought exercise, because I agree. We're going to need, as a people, to retain what makes us human more actively the more we go forward. And because I love chess. I just absolutely adore the game. And it's a wonderful game to sit down and play against someone. But knowing that a computer will beat a grandmaster or just the greatest chess masters in the world repeatedly means that like we've reached our limit. We're never going to play like them. And I think, again, Go was a more sophisticated nut to crack, and I don't think has been reliably cracked yet, although people are losing. Like, great Go players are losing over and over again to computers. It brought in this like fear that I think is rational to what Chris is touching on, which is like, wow, like these games kind of require human intuition and touch, and we're kind of digitizing and replicating it. And it brings us bordering with oblivion. It brings us wondering what the point even is. You know, it's fascinating to like go down that road. And
it's like you see those Boston Dynamics robots dancing and you're like, stay in your fucking lane, dude.
Yeah, like people saying like, because wasn't the tweet like, look at this thing like, but it was some word like, you know, soulfully. That was the word, soulfully dance. And I think people were like, dude, no, there's no way. We have souls. Like these are not things you put into a computer, right? They're things that we think we might have and we put into our pets maybe or something, like living entities. The crossing of this, it's very Black Mirror-esque, and the crossing of the barrier is exciting to think about, but a little scary too. I agree. Zach Forney wrote in, said, greetings, boys. How often do you guys replay your favorite game? Like, Colin, how likely are you to hop back into Mega Man in 2021 and just not say anything? Do you guys have a favorite that you would replay for comfort? Thanks for everything. We've talked about this in the past, but I'm wondering, Dustin, what is the one game that you come back to, and like he said, you would come back to without even really a second thought? For me, because he says Mega Man, I mean, Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3 are those games for me. And I'm sure if you looked at the telemetry on PlayStation Store, you would see that, because I delete games off my hard drive constantly, that I've re-downloaded the Mega Man Legacy Collection probably like 20 times at this point, because I'm like, I don't want it anymore. And then I want it again, and I don't want it anymore, and I want it again. So does any specific game come to mind for you?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I mentioned it earlier, and that's Roller Coaster Tycoon. I played this game. Let's see, it was released in 1999. I think I remember playing it for the first time in 2001, around then. So I was in first grade, and I loved it when I was a kid. I played Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, loved that. Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, not so much. But it didn't matter, because I just went back to play Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. And I probably play this game extensively. I don't know, every other year I'll go through a phase where I'll play it for probably 20 to 30 hours, and then I'll get my fill and then forget about it. And it's serious. It has been like this most of my life, that I will go back to Roller Coaster Tycoon. Something about it. It's so addictive. And I know there's newer games that are available, like Planet Coaster, but I've tried them and I don't know if it's because they're like, there's too many features, and it loses the simplistic joy of creating a park, and it gets too complicated. I don't like that. It's like something about this game has just continued to permeate my mind. And there's other examples too, like Tetris, different variations of Tetris I've played. I think the first version that really, I remember playing Tetris on the original Game Boy, not when it was first out, but we had one in the house. I remember, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. It wasn't until Tetris DS that I really was like, whoa, okay, I think I understand what's so addictive about this game. And since then, like, there's been so many versions, good and bad, that I always go back to. It's the never ending. It's always fun. So,
what do you say, Chris? What is that one game? I mean, I could guess that it would be Doom, but I feel like it's got to be something older like than that.
You know what? It's Dustin already said one of them. Like, I have two that I always go to, and Tetris is definitely one of them. Tetris is just a perfect. I think Tetris is just a perfect video game. I literally don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it is approachable. It's easy to understand. It's challenging. It gets like intense, and it's like, you know, you could give Tetris to like somebody in their 70s, you know, and they'd probably figure it out like pretty quickly. I just think that's a phenomenal video, probably like the best video game ever made. I think you could reasonably argue that. But the other one is just Halo 3. I can play Halo 3 with my eyes closed. I know that game front to back to front. There's like nothing about, and you know what's wild? There's still like, I play that game like once, twice, 3 times a week at least, right? I go through the story sometimes. Like I've beaten that game a million times, but like I'm still finding things that I'm like, I had no idea this was here. And it's like, that's one of the things where it's like, this is a linear FPS and I'm still finding things that I had no idea about. Like you can jump on that thing and fly it. What? Like the sense of discovery in that game is like really, really impactful and just keeps me coming back. But that and Tetris, which are 2 vastly different games, but they just click. They just click with my brain. And yeah, I do go back to those games like all the time. I played Tetris literally earlier today.
Tetris is a great answer, actually, to both of your credit, because when I think about it, I had it on NES, I had it on Game Boy, I had it on Super Nintendo. You know, I had it on, I think, N64. That was one of the last games released there, as I recall. No, that was Dr. Mario, I think, actually. And then, you know, you get into the PS3, the downloadable games and all that. It's always been available. And obviously, Tetris Effect is a game that we all really love. So that's a great answer. And Puyo Puyo Tetris is a newer game that not newer for me, that I enjoy, that I'm pretty bad at. So that's why I don't play it too often. All right, Simon Winstanley has the final comment for the week. He says, "Good evening, Squires. With the report coming out of Polygon about a toxic workplace environment at Fulbright Studio and Steve Gaynor stepping down as creative lead and manager, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The reporting makes it clear that there were no allegations of sexual impropriety, yet continued to stress that there was some kind of issue with his attitude towards women, causing them to leave on a nearly monthly basis. How seriously should this be taken? Does this sound like he's just a bad boss, a high-level creative with a bit of an ego, a sexist? Or is this just a case of activist journalism and getting caught up in the current climate where it seems everyone is out for blood? I know Steve was a favorite of Greg's following the release of Gone Home, and I'm sure Colin has had some dealings with him, so I would love to hear your more of your thoughts on the story." Yeah, I know Steve Gaynor personally, and he's always been really nice to me. Actually, I have a funny memory of him at E3, I guess in 2015 it would have been, or maybe 2016. I went to Microsoft's behind closed door stuff to see like Recore and a few other games, and he was there, and he was, because they were showing Tacoma, because remember Tacoma was like a timed Xbox game, and he was like, "Hey Colin, come," and he like kind of grabbed me, and he's like, "Come and check out the game," and I'm like, "Okay." And that was always just a memory I had of him, of like being friendly and assertive in a pretty corporate environment to get me to go see his game, that it was important for him. So that's just always something that stood out. I should also say that I'm just a huge fan of Gone Home, and I like Tacoma a lot as well. But reading these allegations, it's interesting, Chris, because it to me, I see these things, and this is where things get a little fuzzy, right? I always bring up the Aziz Ansari story as an example of the difference between something truly sinister and something very unfortunate or uncomfortable or ill-timed or whatever. I don't know Steve Gaynor well enough to know. There are people in the games industry I've known where I would have never guessed that they'd have done the things that they've been accused of doing, right? So I don't want to say I would never expect this out of Steve Gaynor. I don't know Steve Gaynor as well as I knew like Steve Butts or Tal Blevins, or guys that have been really accused of shit in the industry. But I feel like these stories are all kind of put together in the same sauce, and I don't think it's fair to anyone involved to conflate non-sexual offenses with gendered necessarily offenses, if that makes any sense. It just seems like it's maybe not fair. So anyway, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I gotta be real. I don't look too deeply into this. So like Steve, I don't know Steve Gaynor from a hole in the wall. I didn't really pay attention to Gone Home. So this studio is like kind of like or Tacoma. It's just kind of like this extraneous studio. So I'm not sure what to say about this, but like I would say that like I kind of echo your sentiment of just it feels like there's a pretty long distance between Aziz Ansari and like Bill Cosby, you know? Like, but they're all brought up in like a very similar vein and like a similar conversation. It's like it's not I would helpful. Agree. I think it's irresponsible also, but Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if something happened, then I hope there's I hope something gets done. You know, if it's not true, then I hope that gets proven as well. I don't know. I don't know this guy.
What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, so I'm with Chris in that I don't. I mean, I looked at the Polygon article earlier, but I'm looking at it now also, and he hasn't actually left the company. He said he's stepping back from my role as creative lead, and he is rethinking my relationship with the to the work at Fulbright. So I don't know. Maybe this is a situation where, sometimes bosses, like someone becomes a boss that really shouldn't be the boss, but a creative lead is different than like a management position. But I guess so if you're the creative lead, then people are working under you. And so, the skills to make and be creative maybe don't condone well always to being a manager. So I don't know. It'll be curious to see, like, if you're on the top of the totem pole like that and you step back to rethink your relationship with a company, it'd be weird to just come back and be like a normal employee. Like, I feel like wouldn't be a good option for the good of everybody at Fulbright, but I don't know. I don't know what the dynamics are at that team, so maybe it would work.
Yeah, I was surprised that they have grown so much that the game can basically continue without him, but also that he wields so much power there that he's obviously not going to be removed. So we'll keep an eye on this. I don't know if this is much ado about nothing or something greater, but he's a big player in the industry. Certainly is one of the biggest so-called indie developers ever. And so we'll certainly track that story if and when it develops. But I wanted to end with that just to let everyone know that we are aware. And yeah, that's basically it. It's time to go. Chris, do you have any closing comments?
No, just stop stop harassing me in my DM. Stop telling me like I'm an Xbox guy.
Yeah, that would be nice. Stop doing that. That's easy enough.
This is only this has happened like maybe like 3 times, by the way, in the last however many months. So it's all good, but like cool with the fanboy stuff.
Dustin, do you have any closing comments?
I will agree with Chris. Colin, I hope to be making you proud. I've been watching The Sopranos, and so you know when I say, take it easy. Okay.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Forget about it. I'm very, very proud of you. Do you like it?
I love it, dude. Holly and I, we're already on season 2, and it's funny. I love Mad Men for so many years, and people are like, oh, if you like Mad Men, watch Downton Abbey. Which I watched.
What?
I watched like 3 or 4
because
episodes.
Because of the period, I guess, period piece stuff. Yeah. I
guess, and it's like kind of like, I always jokingly call Mad Men a soap opera for intellectuals, which is not. I mean, that's not a dumb term, but Mad Men is kind of like a soap opera. I mean, it's a drama. What's the difference between soap opera and drama? Really, just budget, maybe the level of cheesiness in the writing, but. No one ever said, hey, Dustin, you like Mad Men? You should watch Sopranos. No one ever said that.
Which is weird because they come from the same person. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. He started, I don't know if he started, but Matthew
Chase.
Weiner was a writer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. So David Chase started The Sopranos. Matthew Weiner ended up being like a huge story force in the writer's room during The Sopranos.
Right.
And helped, form the arc and then created Mad Men. And Mad Men, I think, is arguably the best drama ever. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's so good. I just watched the episode where they go to Italy for the first time. It was very such a good character. So I could do a whole episode about Sopranos. You and Dagan did.
We did, right? But we did it early in Knockback, and we have the new rule now where we do 1 season per episode. So we're gonna go back and do Sopranos the right way, but we'll save that. Maybe we'll do that very good. Leading up to the Many Saints at Newark or whatever.
Right.
The movie, the prequel movie. Anyway, that's it. Time to go. Thank you so much for your love, kindness, and support. We appreciate you. Patreon.com/laststandmedia. Laststandmedia.shop if you want to buy merch. We have cool shirts, vinyl stickers, all the rest made in the USA, shipped from the USA. We appreciate you so much. And let me think. Is there anything else? No, I guess not. We'll talk to you next time.
No.
Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.